welcome to the April 12th, 2023 meeting of the Lower Merion Board of Commissioners. We have 4 meetings this evening. We have a Grants and Community Development meeting. We have a Building and Planning Committee meeting. We have an Administrative and Human Resources Committee meeting, and then a special Board of Commissioners meeting. So before we start, please remember to silence your cell phones. There is equipment for the hearing impaired that is available if needed. And then when the floor is open for public comment, what we will do is we'll first take public comment from people in the room, then from people who are attending virtually by Zoom. If you are here in the room, please use this podium. It is important that you speak into the microphone, and if necessary, lift up that microphone so it's close to your mouth. Otherwise, we will not be able to hear you up here. You'll come through fine on TV, but we won't be able to hear you. And then for those on Zoom, if you want to make a comment, please raise your virtual hand, and then the Township Secretary will promote you to the meeting to make your comments. And then, of course, if you're going to make public comment, we ask that you introduce yourself with your name and what part of the township you live in before you start making your comments. And of course, our usual practice is to respond to comments after you are done. So with that, we will start with our first committee meeting of this evening. It is the Grants and Community Development Committee, and I recognize its chair, Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you, President Sinai. Good evening, everyone. We are here this evening with 2 agenda items. The first is the second public hearing on our CDBG 2023-24 action plan. We've had the first one 2-3 weeks ago, and that helped us to discern areas of priority based on community feedback and applications into the township on action plan advertising. So, and just as a reminder for those who aren't here, there are major goals and limitations that we have around the federal funding. We, estimate about a $1.058 million allocation for this year, but, we don't know yet. But it really is to address affordable housing, to suitable living environments, to the expansion of economic opportunity for people in our township, et cetera. So we've all received the action plan proposal that we're discussing this evening, and we'd like to turn to Manager McNeely for an overview. And of course, what's great about the hearings that it gives us a chance not just to talk, but to hear from those of you in the audience about what your funding priorities are for as an applicant, and how it may fit into the goals of the CDBG program. So, Manager McNeely, I almost demoted you again.
Thanks, Commissioner O'Neill. You did a great job explaining. This is the second step in the process. This is really about listening and taking public comment. The process is required. You have to have 2 public hearings prior to a meeting when you will actually make allocations of your community development block grant allocation for the coming year. That has to be done in May, so we conduct this hearing tonight to take more public comment and information. You have a draft allocation plan that has been prepared by staff, and that's something we can take a look at here and go over, and then take some public comment. You don't have to make any decisions here tonight. That's a decision-making process you will do in May. With that, I would turn it over to our Community Development Technician or Assistant Director, Charlie Doyle. It looks like Charlie's coming up, but Emily is too.
Right, thank you so much. Mr. Doyle will have a bite at the apple of agenda item 2 for sure.
Technologically challenged, so he's helping me out. Okay, all right. I think you were talking specifically to me, Commissioner Sinai, when you said move the microphone up. I always have issues with this. Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. And you already said a few of the things I needed to say about the process, this being the second public hearing, and not needing to vote on anything tonight, so that's already all been said. All right, so I was just going to review with you a little bit the process. You've already said a lot of it, but we did get the applications in February. All the applications were reviewed by staff and also by one of our consultants from Triad, who helps us navigate HUD rules before being reviewed with the Grants Committee. And then you were going to hear about it tonight. And as you said, we don't have to vote on it. We can wait until May, but hopefully if you do have any changes you want to make, as soon as possible is great, so we can get it all in on time to HUD this year. We do have, HUD has given us our allocation and a change from prior years. We are not going forward blind. The total budget that we are proposing this year is $1,058,500, and that comes from both the allocation from HUD, which we have gotten, which is in the amount of $964,068. We're also going to be able to make use of approximately $94,000 of program income this year. I don't know if you're all familiar with program income, but sometimes when we work on different houses through the owner-occupied rehab program, if there is a lien on the house in the end, which there isn't always, but if there is, and if they eventually sell the house, we do get some of that money back. We also get some program income as part of the home purchase program. So we do every year have a little bit of, or most years we have some program income that we can add into the pot. But obviously most of it's coming from the allocation. And just because this question has been asked a number of times, we're putting in, just showing you what the allocation has been over the past 7 years. It went down a little bit this year from last year, about $29,000 or something. But you can see over the last 7 years that it's been up and down. Apparently, that is something that is very, I shouldn't say secretive, but it's something that HUD is not super open about, so we don't know why it goes up and down in a given year. This year, the actual CDBG overall budget stayed the same, but the way that they have a formula they use that takes into consideration the amount of poverty, the age of the housing, and even just the overall numbers in the township, and nobody knows apparently exactly how they come up with that number, so we don't know why it goes up and down from one year to the next. Just to remind you about the categories of funding, we break it down into 5 categories, which I mentioned at the last meeting. There's administration and planning, public services, economic development, housing and rehabilitation, and public works. The only 2 categories that have a limit on them in spending are admin and planning. We can spend 20% on administration and planning, and we can spend 15% on public services. Public services, we are allowed to bump up a little bit based on the program income. So we can also spend 15% of the program income that comes in, so we can bump that up a little bit. Just another reminder that we do have, all the money that we spend has to fall under 3 national objectives, they call it, as defined by HUD. And one is a benefit to low and moderate income persons. The second is slum and blight, which we don't have in this township. We're very lucky. And the third is urgent need. Almost all the money, well, no, all the money we spend goes to low and moderate income persons' benefit to low, because we just don't have. We've spent a little bit of urgent need during COVID, but other than that, we are only in the one category. So you can see how the funding breaks down between the different categories. So I'm gonna just quickly run you through the budget now. The first part of the budget is always the administration. This year we have 2 activities being funded by administration and planning. One is just the general administration of the program, for which we are proposing $145,000 right now. This covers staff salaries. It covers the cost of the consultants' fees, who help us keep in line with HUD, advertising fees, and various trainings for some of the nonprofits that we work with. The second is the Housing Equality Center, and we are proposing that we fund them $8,500 this year. The center does provide trainings and outreach about fair housing, as well as resources and counseling for victims of housing discrimination. I always say we are always happy to fund them, and it is it's a requirement of our grant that we try to further fair housing in our community. So then the second category is the public services. This is always the hard one. We have a lot of worthy organizations doing really good work and never enough money to spend. I think we had about $600,000 worth of requests, and we can only spend about $158,000 on that, so it's a really tough one. I'm just going to show you, whoops, no, not that one. Anyway, I guess it's right here. So never mind. I was looking for a slide that is not there. The bulk of the public services money in the past has been spent on the Ardmore Avenue Community Center for staffing there and on the minibus service. This year we're proposing on $108,500 to the staffing and $6,000 to the minibus program, which transports seniors and youth and adults with disabilities to different events and things like that around the township. ElderNet, we're proposing this year to support ElderNet on 3 different fronts. One is for their escort driver service program. They have a robust volunteer program, but when a volunteer is not available to give somebody a ride, they can call them a cab instead, and we've funded that for years, and we're proposing $2,000 on that this year. It's been particularly important during COVID because they've had fewer volunteers, so that's been very well used in the last couple of years. The second is their care management program, which pays a partial salary for one of the social workers, helping the seniors at ElderNet, and for that we're proposing $7,500 this year. The third one is a new program that we're thinking about this year. We are thinking about a whole bunch of people in concert, but ElderNet is taking the lead. And that would be providing vouchers for homeless individuals in the township. And for that, right now, the proposal on the table is $5,000. It's a bit of a pilot program. The next one is the Palm Center. We support classes there for art and exercise classes for the seniors at the Palm Center, and we're proposing $7,500 for that. We support the Montgomery County Women's Center. We support them with their rent every year. We're proposing $3,500 for that. New Horizons Senior Center, we pay a partial salary for the organizational staff there. $6,000 is proposed for that. Neighbors Helping Neighbors is also, we assist with a partial salary for their organization helping with food insecurity. And that is $7,500. And Box Lunch and a Book, again this year, providing food insecurity needs for campers in the summer when they're out of school, and also supplies for the camp, and that's at $5,000. So everything on that list has been funded before except for the hotel voucher program that's proposed to assist with homelessness. So that is the public service category, and anytime we want to add money to there, we have to think about where to move it around because we can't really add any more than that. The next category is public works. This is providing ADA ramps all around the township, or at this point really more upgrading them. We're proposing $100,000 for that this year. We have 30 ramps underway right now with some of the last year's money, so that's just an ongoing need in the township. The next category is economic development, and that is supporting 2 programs that we've supported in the past. The first is through Ardmore Initiative, and is for job creation. Different businesses can take out a loan they can rehab their space, they can buy new equipment, whatever it is they want to do that allows them to employ a low to moderate income person for a series of years, for 3 years. The second is the facade program, and that is for business owners all throughout the township. If they have some sort of code violation and need to do some work to the front of their building, they can get some grant money for that. And those are proposed at $25,000 for Ardmore Initiative for job creation and $20,000 for the facade program. The last category is our biggest one, the housing rehabilitation, and we have a number of different projects this year. A lot of this is housing, and some of it is rehab programs for outside organizations. Sorry, thank you for looking up there. The rehab programs projects that are being proposed outside of housing are for the Ardmore Library. They're going to be building a new ADA ramp to replace one that is basically rotting and not doing too well. And we have $110,000 proposed to support that. The second one is for the Center for Creative Works. They have 2 art studios there that they cannot use in anything other than perfect weather because there's no HVAC in either of them, no heating and cooling, and not even a window in one of them. So in order to use them all year round, they would like to provide HVAC for that. And the third one is for the Kaiserman JCC. They are looking to get seniors up to some exercise rooms on the second floor that they can't currently access, and we're hoping they'd applied to hopefully put in a stair chair, but there's been some confusion about whether or not that would technically qualify as ADA, so we're going to instead grant them some money to do a little planning study and figure out how they can get seniors around their building a little bit better. And then we have the housing categories, which you've heard 100 times before, but we have the owner-occupied rehabilitation program, which allows owners, current owners, to make repairs to their homes that they can't otherwise afford and hopefully stay in their homes longer. And between the hard costs and soft costs, we're proposing $225,000 for that. There's also the home purchase program, which allows approximately 1 family a year to a first-time home buyer program to buy a house in Lower Merion Township with some financial assistance. And we're proposing $165,000 for that this year. That includes the cost to support Lower Merion affordable housing and project delivery for that. We also have a rental rehab program, which we have had on the books for a few years, and we are currently working on the regs for that, and we have a couple people on the waiting list. And that's providing loans to landlords in order to fix up a rental unit. At this point, either to create an affordable rental unit or maintain it. We're finding that a lot of landlords, we're having a lot of people call in who are being evicted because landlords are looking to get rid of their tenants, fix it up, and rent it for a lot more. So we're hoping to provide an incentive for them to keep renting at a lower rate. I'm proposing $50,000 for that. And the last one is also something that's been on the books for a couple of years and also has a waiting list right now, and we're working on the regs, and hopefully now that we're through the COVID money, we're going to be doing all right. And that's for the Senior Handy Helper Program, and that's for seniors to make smaller repairs in their homes that will not result in liens like it does in the other program. So hopefully we'll get that off the ground in the next couple months. And that is the end of the budget for this year. And then I just want to take you through a little bit. We had been asked a couple times about the way we've spent in the past and where this money has gone and whether or not we have any data on that. And so we did pull together a sheet it's in your agenda, and it's up here too. We're missing one slide, which is the first one, which talks about the residential, the owner-occupied rehabilitation program. And the chart is just showing that over the 5 years, we spent just shy of about $1 million in that project. And it shows you that in the last 5 years, in each year we've worked on 11 households, 8, 7, 6, 8. So the variation in that. Usually our goal is to serve between 8 and 10 households in a year. So we've almost hit it every year. Got a couple wrinkly years of COVID in there where we were doing a lot less rehab. And then we're showing some of the funds that are spent on lead and the funds that are spent on rehab and the funds that are spent total. And it looks like the years are very different. They're not quite as different as they look. I'm required by HUD to put, we work on a different fiscal budget than the township. So some of the money that looks like there was almost nothing spent in the fiscal year 47. That's because some of 46 and some of 48 were really in that year, and it does kind of balance out. What it ends up being is that over the 5 years, we spent $969,000 on the rehab program, helped about 8 houses a year, spent about $24,000 per household, or about $193,000 a year. So that's just an overview of how that program is going. The home purchase program has had 13 houses purchased in total. A couple of them are under construction right now. One is for sale. Of the 10 that have been sold, everybody is still in them. Nobody has sold one of those houses and moved out, so we feel like it's been a very successful program. The total money that's been spent per house is around $260,000. With that, we do have, the way that program works is that the houses do have a lien on them, some of which goes away and some of which will never go away. So we do have approximately $1.4 million in liens on those houses, so that at some point when they are sold, that money comes back to the township and goes back into the program to help additional families. I won't bore you with all the details on here, but it shows for the public services, you can see over the 5 years what's been spent on each public service, what's been spent on the curb cuts. We have other rehab projects that have been spent on. Center for Creative Works is one. They've got a flooring before, Ardmore House elevator upgrade, Bryn Mawr Community Center. It goes on, and I won't read off the whole thing because you can read it. And then at the very bottom, it does show what we've spent in the COVID money too, and it's a little bit more than that. Right now we've spent about $900,000 of the COVID money, so we only have about $80,000 left to spend and 3 more years to spend it. So we're in good shape with that. I just want to mention also that Melissa Walsh from Triad is on the call, so if anybody has any more specific questions that a HUD consultant might be able to answer, feel free to ask her as well. And that's about it. So if you guys have any questions before we open up, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much for the overview and the presentation. It puts into context some of what we'll hear about in terms of the members of the public who would like to come and give their public comments about some of their own programs.
Hello. Adrian Seltzer, Wynwood. I was looking over this, and I understand that the home purchase program has helped 10 families in the last 15 years. And I was then seeing that you are starting something with rental assistance program. I had asked several years ago, actually pre-COVID, about whether or not the township keeps track of occupancy in the apartments that are throughout the township. And I was told no. And I figured that if you guys kept track of the occupancy, you would know which landlords to reach out to maybe do a subsidy program to help more people. The teachers who can't, teachers, school staff who can't afford to live in the township, workers in the healthcare system that can't afford to live in the township, township workers that can't afford to live in the township. So I think that where the home project does create generational wealth, there's no way at prices for houses at this time you're going to find anything in the township for $260,000. So I feel that that money might be better spent working on a subsidy program where you can reimburse landlords for some of the rent so that the apartments can be rented to people with lower incomes. And in Lower Merion, a lower income is still considered somewhere around $70,000. So we're not, for people who get all up in themselves about public housing, that's not what we're talking about here. But I think that would be something that you should look at, that you might be able to help way more families than you do currently with the program that's helped 10 families in 15 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bill Gross, and I'm president of ElderNet of Lower Merion and Narberth. I would say for over 47 years, we've been a safety net for lower income elderly and to a lesser extent the disabled in our community. And our goal has always been to help people remain in their homes as long as possible with as much dignity and with as much safety as possible. For those of you who don't know, I'll just quickly say our 3 activities are our food pantry, where in 2022 we helped 250 households combat food scarcity on a regular basis. It's every twice a month they come and get food. Our second is care management with licensed social workers helping 333 participants and their families dealing with chronic illness, with mental problems, which seems to be more and more, as well as trying to connect them with benefits and resources. And third, through our robust volunteer corps, we provided over 4,700 hours of service in driving people to doctors and medical appointments and pharmacies and food stores. In total, I was told 1,339 round-trip rides in 2022. And these people are dependent on our services. And only because of our services can they maintain some degree of independence. And they need us. Well, why I'm here tonight is, unfortunately, to tell you that Eldernet is experiencing very hard times financially. I think it might be the first time that we've come to the township to say that over the years. We're reaching out. We have projected six-figure deficits for this year and next year. We're reaching out to our various sources of funding, foundations, individual donors, and county and township partners to meet the challenge. Regarding Lower Merion Township, we had an initial meeting with Ernie McNeely and hope to schedule a follow-up meeting with Emily Crane sometime next week to explore additional block grant and other funding possibilities. And we really ask you, our community commissioners, to be open to additional funding for Eldernet during this critical time. I mean, we're determined to continue that 45-year tradition of providing the services needed to most needy and vulnerable in our community. And I'd like to end just by reading you a note that we received in December from one of our participants, if we may. Where would we be without Eldernet? Probably nowhere, because they are simply the best. If you are disabled or just plain old, they'll try to help you and not just leave you in the cold. Whether it's help with getting your meds, to rides, or even food, they will do their best to assist you without being rude. A little bit of poetry there, I think. We honestly can't see them ever leaving us. I mean, from kind words of encouragement plus other stuff, so many ways that they make a positive difference in our lives. If asked if we really need their services, we wouldn't even have to think twice. The answer is yes, always, because they are simply the best. So we just want to say, from us to you, all of you, Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, too. Commissioners, we can't let them down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Hi, Miriam Phillips. I'm from Ward 4 in Lower Merion Township, and I just wanted to comment on two things that are in the proposed budget for the next CDBG round. And the first is to say I'm really happy to see the rental assistance program is getting closer to launching and looking forward to the regulations, because not everyone is a homeowner in Lower Merion, and so any assistance we can provide to folks that are really struggling with rental properties and not having them taken out from under them would be great. So hope we get to work with the landlords on that. And the other thing I just wanted to make as a comment in that I want to make sure that everyone understands that because the amount decreased for the community center shows that less is being apportioned out of these funds to support the salaries there, that just means the township is committing more general funds towards the staffing and operations of the building. So that lowering, if that helps to fund other programs within the public services budget, that's a good thing. And as a past board member for the community center, I know that the staff was always very nervous about hearing that their salaries were funded through federal funds that go up and down and could possibly go away. So I'm just pointing out that this is a way for the federal funds to still be committed to the community center, but that it doesn't mean it's going to impact the staff that are there necessarily at all. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Nancy Scarlato. I'm the Executive Director of Ardmore Initiative, and we're here to ask for your support of our application for CDBG funds. As many of you are aware, we first applied for these in 2011, and the purpose of our Business Assistance Grant Program is to assist new businesses with startup costs or rehab costs. And then the objective is to create jobs for low to moderate income people. In 2011, we worked with you at the township and HUD to draft these program guidelines, create eligibility criteria, and this is, since this supports our business recruitment efforts, only new and expanding retail or restaurant businesses are eligible for funding. We have a committee that scores grant applicants made up of Ardmore Initiative board members, Lower Merion Township staff, local business owners, and this program has really been a success for the past 12 years, and it's provided assistance to new businesses in the Ardmore Business District. Tired Hands, Delice Chocolat are just two examples of grant recipients that have brought vitality and, most importantly, jobs to Ardmore. In 2021, because of the pandemic, we shifted the program from job creation to job retention, and our most recent award was to Merion Art and Repro, which is a 50-year business, 50-plus year business in Ardmore, and because of our funding, the business was able to retain over 17 individuals who would have lost their jobs without the funding. The purpose of this program is job creation and bringing new businesses to the Ardmore, and because of this, we have created and now retained over 130 full and part-time jobs for low to moderate income households. The enthusiasm, vitality, creativity that these businesses have brought to Ardmore is the real benefit of this program, and we would obviously love to see it continue and would love your support in continuing to offer this. I had a quick question or point to make. When you looked up there on the slides and saw Ardmore Initiative and you saw a 1, I don't know whether that was one grant or one job, but we only award grants pretty much annually, and for every $20,000 of grant funding, we report on one job that was created. So we don't necessarily include, am I saying something? No, okay. We don't necessarily include all the people who are hired at the creation of a new business, but we track one person against the grant funding that we've received. So while many people have been hired, only one is who we report to HUD for the CDBG grants. Thank you. We look forward to continuing this program for new businesses coming to Ardmore, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Lorraine Carter from Ardmore, and I'm here on behalf of Box Lunch and a Book. I want to thank you for your consideration of funding this program. Just a quick overview of it. It was actually founded by community members here in 2016. It's grown quite a bit. During the summer, it provides young folks, typically kindergarten through grade 8, with summer tutoring, summer programming, camp-like activities as well as food lunches and weekend bags for families, approximately 70 families or so. Over the years, the program has actually expanded. We learned from our parents that they needed to better understand how to navigate the school system, so we started community conversations. We work quite collaboratively with the Lower Merion School District. They come and make presentations with us around education factors that parents need to know. It also expanded. We came to understand that A lot of the youth who are participating in the program are involved with special education, disability needs within the district. So we actually created the special education buddies. Right now we have about 15 community members who have agreed to become a buddy, and we'll match them with the families of children who do have an IEP 504 agreement plan or a gifted IEP. And actually it's so that the family can have an additional support. I don't know if you've ever been to a special education meeting, but it's usually a parent or parents surrounded by a group of folks similar to what we see here tonight. And quite often they feel overwhelmed. So with a buddy, there's an added support for them, and the buddies are trained. We've actually worked with some local special education advocates who provided an overview of special education disability law, the process of obtaining and walking through an IEP, and all of those sort of things as well. So we're really listening to the folks that we're serving, finding out what do they need, and then just really building programming around that. But it does primarily focus on the two areas, education as well as food security for the children and the families within the community. Thank you again for your consideration and for your giving to the program as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Manira Walker, Neighbors Helping Neighbors on the main line. I just wanted to take a couple minutes to say that through help from you and from others, we're very proud of the accomplishments that we've been making at Neighbors Helping Neighbors, some of which include our success in filling the food pantry gap by creating a system for those who can't use standard pantries. Our free summer programs for parents who can't afford summer camp, our myriad of outreach efforts, one of which has actually been getting the hard-to-reach community voice into township and county efforts. We're very proud of that. Our community is really, really responding to that, and we welcome the chance to help them get their voice to you. And also, we made a formal commitment to the sustainability efforts of the township. We have committed to using the rest of the plastic that has already been pre-purchased, but from there we will use only paper bags and biodegradable items for our delivery efforts. So while we jumped into action for COVID response, we're now in our 4th year, and the needs continue across our programs. We're now assisting more than 1,000 residents a year. And we've become the organization that other safety net organizations in Lower Merion and Montgomery County rely on and refer others to when they can't assist them. So we're proud of the growth in our work and the gaps that we're filling and the new and unexpected beautiful relationships that are forming throughout Lower Merion. On behalf of our team at Neighbors Helping Neighbors on the main line, I'd like to thank you for the support you've shown in the past and also for your consideration of future support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners, colleagues, neighbors. My name is Alan Scher. I have the pleasure and honor of serving as the CEO at the Kaiserman JCC. Wanted to give a little bit of context to the request for support this evening. The Kaiserman JCC is celebrating our 50th anniversary this year, serving our community here from Wynwood. We recently announced that we, as an institution, are in the process of merging and integrating with another institution, Golden Slipper Gems. The two of our organizations have a long-standing history of serving older adults in this community. This institution has done incredible work in terms of demographics and has articulated clearly the aging population and the need for increased services moving forward for active older adults. Kaiserman JCC is poised, proud, and ready to serve that population in as robust a way as they need. And with the integration of our partners from Golden Slipper Gems, we anticipate being able to do that significantly. The ask that we have in front of the commission group this evening, I would argue, is a multiplier. It's an opportunity for you to catalyze significant more services into the future. Through this small allocation of resources, we'll be able to better assess how we can go from serving already hundreds of active older adults at our community center to, in the future, significantly larger numbers. We're grateful for the consideration of this investment and really excited to partner with the community in this capacity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the community here or on our online community? No? Okay. One, okay.
This will be Carolyn Steinhofer. She is online.
Hello. Hi. I hope you can hear me. I'm Carolyn Steinhofer. I'm with the Housing Equality Center of Pennsylvania. Lower Merion Township has been very generous in funding our program over the years. We appreciate that very much, and we look forward to continuing to provide fair housing services to Lower Merion residents. We do get quite a number of calls from Lower Merion residents who have been discriminated against because they have a disability or they need assistance in requesting a reasonable accommodation or modification so that they can stay in their home. So we really appreciate your support and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah.
Something else that I've got to say. It's really quick.
Go ahead. Thank you. Sorry, I can't.
Sorry, I got my pages mixed up. I was wondering, the rehabilitation for the Ardmore Library ramp, are you only building half the ramp? How does that work? Because they said it was going to cost $210,000 and you're only allocating $110,000.
Thank you. We'll respond to that. Thank you. Great. Any other comments or questions from members of the public? Okay, and we could take a few minutes and talk about any from the commissioners if we have questions, comments, recommendations, motions. Keeping an eye on the time, but I don't want to cut these conversations short. These are important as well. But we are about 25 minutes behind schedule. So. Yes, Commissioner Kramer, Gilda.
Yes, I was interested in the comment from former Commissioner Miriam Phillips regarding the amounts that are being allocated to the Ardmore Avenue Community Center staff, and that this is just really a township obligation, a township expense, because these are township employees, so we are basically taking CDBG money and moving it over to the budget. And I wanted to make sure that my understanding is correct, because if that's correct, then out of $158,500 in the public service money that we have available, we're spending $114,500 to subsidize our own budget, leaving only $44,000 for the community, many community organizations who are getting a fraction of what they've been requesting. And I just want to make sure that my understanding is correct.
Okay, thank you.
That's basically right, Commissioner. Over the years, at one point, community development block grant monies funded all of the salaries at the community center. Over the years, that has been whittled down, and so every dollar you reduce in community development block grant funding for the community center salaries ends up coming out of the township budget. So that's correct.
So if we were to reduce the amount that we are subsidizing our budget with and pay for our budget in other ways, there would be more money available for some of the organizations that perhaps are struggling and have a need for greater assistance. Is that correct?
If you reduce the allocation for community center salaries, that's correct. You would have more money you could allocate under public services for other uses, and the balance of whatever you reduced it from would end up being made up by taxpayer dollars.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Sean Kramer.
Thank you. I just have a question for staff about, I'm not familiar with the Center for Creative Works and who they serve, so I would just be curious to hear about that. I think that's a new allocation, if I'm not mistaken, or the rehab allocation is, I've never heard of them before, so I just would be curious about who they serve. And then my next question is, of the housing and rehab pods, if they're not capped, which I don't think they are, right? If rehab money weren't used for some organizations, it would then be available, say, for housing programs. We wouldn't have to stay in rehab, right? Okay. I mean, we can talk about that now, or we can talk about that another time, whatever you think.
Ms. Crane, if you wouldn't mind, it's a good question that if we could elaborate briefly on the reallocation if funds are underused from year to year.
Yeah, so any of the other funds can be moved around in the way that you're suggesting, as long as we're not moving it into public services. We can, anything that doesn't get spent here can get spent there. The Center for Creative Works is right down on, it's on Lancaster Avenue, just down from the township, and it is, I think its parent company, I'm just going to say for lack of better words, is Resources for Human Development, and they serve disabled adults. They have art classes, and it's a day program for disabled adults.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Going around the bend, anybody else from your side? Seeing none on our side as well. I just have one quick closing comment. I think we'll prepare to close the hearing at this point. I do want to flesh out something that Commissioner Gilda Kramer said with respect to the amounts for recommended funding of 108 for the Ardmore Avenue Community Center. I would like to explore this a little more in the weeks to come prior to our May final passage, because we do know there may be other ways in which we can help to fund any gap if we were to reallocate the 108. I'm looking specifically at Adjournment for their salary needs as well, and whether there's a way to split that in half and allocate $54,000 to Adjournment for the purposes of salary. Then that is, each organization will be allocated 50% of what their need would be, and I believe that there are other possible funds that will be closing up this year, whether it's from a housing sale that's currently on the market, and can we commit to using those proceeds for the purposes of funding the salary rather than taking it over to the operation budget for salary cap for salary. But effectively, I would like to allocate the sale of our home that's for sale now, whatever amount, I would like to be able to allocate X amount of that to replace $54,000 to the Ardmore Avenue Community Center rather than going to the operations budget.
So are you saying you want to take the proceeds from the house and put it towards Ardmore Avenue or towards?
Right.
So we can't do that because it's a public service, and that will take us over the cap. So we just can't.
Not in total, whatever the portion is that would keep us at the 15% cap. It could be $10,000 toward it. It would depend on the sale of the house.
No. Oh, I'm sorry. So I'm sorry. I
that's
catch
okay.
what you're saying. So we can only use 15% of program income if it's in the prior year. So it has to be program income that comes in before June 30th.
Okay.
So if we have more program income coming in, I see what you're saying, before June 30th, then yes, we can allocate 15% of that. It won't be that much.
Right, no,
but
for sure.
But yes, we can reallocate that money, but we have to, that's only provided it comes in before June 30th. So if it doesn't, then it's in the next year, it goes forward to the following year.
Okay, so in May, we'll want to flesh that out a little more, and maybe we'll have answers for that.
Yeah, that's right.
So, great, thank you. Any other questions? President Sinai, anything? No? Okay, great. Well, in that regard, I'll close the hearing and then move on to, it is hereby closed. And now we'll move to the second agenda item that deals, this is we'll need to make a motion. I'll go ahead and get the motion on the floor. Yes.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Response to Ms. Seltzer's question about the
yes, go right ahead.
Rental assistance, in brief.
Yes.
the county has a program that can help.
Commissioner Kramer, could you speak up?
I'm sorry. Montgomery County offers a program through the Housing and Community Development Office for landlords who have vacancies and would be willing to rent the units at below market rates. Any landlords that are listening, let me know. We'd love to have participants here in Lower Merion. It may be something to explore expanding, but the first thing I would do would be to tell people to connect with the county program on that. Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay, now we will officially close the hearing and move to the next agenda item. So I would like to make a motion to consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners approval to execute a consultant agreement with Genesis Housing Corporation and Diamond and Associates to prepare necessary feasibility information and to seek funding and construct an addition to Ardmore House. Excuse me. May I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. And briefly, is he in? Actually, if it's okay. Ernie, if you wouldn't mind giving us a quick overview of the need and where we stand, and we'll vote on this and move forward.
Sure, Commissioners. As you recall, we sought and were awarded a $3 million grant from Montgomery County in order to put forward a project that would add an addition onto Ardmore House, perhaps 30-plus units. We've been talking about it for a while with the Ardmore House Board, some of the members who are here tonight, and we've reached a point where because this project needs to get going, we need to allocate, commit those $3 million by the end of 2024. We need to get this project moving, and staff felt the best way to do this was to get a consultant on board who would go through the process of doing a feasibility study with some initial architectural and engineering costs, and get us into a position to then be able to apply for Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency tax credits and perhaps other HUD funding in order to figure out how to make the project work for a developer to come in and build this addition. The addition would sit on what is currently the parking lots behind the Ardmore House, which is township property, and would connect into the rear of Ardmore House, share some of the ground floor and second floor entrances and facilities, and so we think the best way to get this going is a consultant. We know that Genesis Housing, one of the consultant team that we're talking about here, has worked over the years with Ardmore House. And so we solicited this proposal and recommend that in the interest of expedience that we proceed with retaining these consultants and getting them on board. You can see from the timeline they gave us that they anticipate being ready with a report, essentially a feasibility by the fall, which was put us in pretty good position to be able to start applying for those other financing opportunities. And they've given us a proposal. It would have to be developed into a formal contract with the help of our solicitor, but the total cost is not to exceed $115,000. Be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Commissioner Bernheim.
Yeah, thank you very much. Manager McNeely, and I don't mean to put you on the spot at all. All in favor of the project, all in favor of the idea of getting somebody to take it off the plate of our staff in order to move this thing forward. So I sort of struggle in how to say this when I read what came across it. It's to hire Genesis, who's going to hire Diamond Associates, who's going to hire an accountant and an engineer, or an accountant, an architect and an engineer. Yeah. And 40% of the 115 is going to go for the consultant that's going to hire a consultant that's going to hire the architect.
It's 14.
So, right, I know. Yeah. However, saying that, and I didn't mean to be as facetious as that may have sounded, are we able to condense some of this, and so that, what we do is need one person, maybe we just hire the architect to come back and give us the plans as to what's going on. It appeared some layers, and I was questioning how necessary this construct is in order to move it forward.
I would say it's essential. We need a team to put together the feasibility here and get us in a position to be able to apply for those tax credits and potential HUD funding. And some architectural sketches and drawings is not going to do it. It's going to need a financial analysis. It's going to need the whole package. So I'd say it's essential to have this team actually put together. Now, obviously, we could try putting together a team ourselves, but with our contracting rules and regulations, we're talking 6 months to go through RFPs and hire a team such as this. And at that point, we're behind the 8 ball. We're not going to meet the deadlines we need to meet.
No, I wholeheartedly agree about getting somebody external to go ahead and do it. You know, no offense to internally to our staff, but these things overwhelm them in order to do that. Do you know what the difference is between what Genesis is doing and Diamond Associates?
I do not know what the division is between those two. They both work in the same general area. Yeah. But I think Diamond has done more in the form of complete projects, whereas Genesis does a lot of the initial consulting. But I'm not certain.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Again, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No,
not at all.
Any other questions from board members? Okay. Yes, Commissioner Zeloff.
Thanks, Commissioner O'Neill. There's an ad hoc affordable housing committee chaired by Commissioner Stevenson. So if he's on the screen, I'm not aware of it, but he's not here so far tonight. Commissioners Kramer and myself, we meet every month. Affordable housing is a very complex issue, as we've all discussed up here, and many of you have heard. This project makes sense, and this project is complex, but appears to possibly be doable, and this is an important step. Ernie participates in our weekly and our monthly meetings, and he's got a lot of knowledge, but it's beyond what Ernie and our staff have specific expertise on. This involves tax credits, involves a state agency. The Ardmore House has a demonstrated need. There's a waiting list. And so this project makes a lot of sense. It's funded by, what's before us would be funded by our affordable housing funds that are accumulating. And this would be an important step forward in a difficult issue that we've been wrestling with for some time.
Yeah, I would just add to that before I turn to public comment really quickly. Genesis is really, of all the organizations corporations that are within this wheelhouse, Genesis is really probably the best in the Commonwealth, if not in the entire East Coast. They get the complex financials that are required in projects like this. They have the relationships with county and state government agencies to get the stackable funding set. And I was pleased to see, I understand your, the sensitivity, but I think under the circumstances they will hire the architects, et cetera.
Sold.
So, thank you. So, okay, great. So, members of the public, questions, concerns, comments, please. Yes. Ms. Phillips.
Different hat this time. Merion Phillips, still Ward 4, but president of Ardmore House Board of Directors. And I'm joined by Mary Graham-Zack, who is our secretary.
Ward 9 secretary for Ardmore House.
Yes, so
hi.
We're just here to affirm that the Ardmore House Board fully supports the hiring of this team to move the project forward. For your information, what Genesis brings to the table is they are also this CHOTA, which is a legal speak for an organization that can actually receive certain types of funding. So if they identify certain types of funding that can come through other means than, just the COVID money or the other county money or housing development money through the county, they would be ones that would be able to accept it down the road. So I'm comfortable with Judy. Judy has done a lot of work for us. She's well known. She's certainly the force behind Lower Merion Affordable Housing. She's the underpinnings of all of their work as well in terms of staff work. So hiring the developer to help put together all of the, the architectural details is critical also to the work that she's going to do to kind of layer it all together and feather it into one report. And $115,000, I don't think we can beat that price with a stick. So, yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone online? Okay, great. I wish that Commissioner Stevenson could be here, because I know this is one that he's super passionate about, this project, and seeing it through. I can't speak for him and won't, but I am pretty certain that he would be proud of us if this passed. So, oh, he's listening, good.
I'm actually here.
Oh, yes, please.
Yes, I do support it, and thank everybody for supporting as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring this to a vote. All those in favor of the motion is, I'll say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. I believe it's unanimous with not being able to see Commissioner Stevenson's vote, but anyway. Okay, so that concludes the business of the Grants Committee. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner O'Neill.
Sorry, we're a little late.
And no worries. And our next committee meeting is the Building and Planning Committee, and I recognize its Vice Chair, Commissioner McCann.
Thank you, President Sinai. There are 8 agenda items on the Building and Planning Committee meeting tonight. I know that many of you, or I suspect many of you are here to talk about the last one, the presentation of the draft Ardmore Master Plan. So just to give some background on that, that is a review and discussion item only tonight. We're here just for a Building and Planning Committee session. The Board of Commissioners needs to eventually accept the plan at a later time. If and when it's accepted, it's a planning document, it's not the law. But as you see with the comprehensive plan, planning documents can become the basis for ordinances, like the comp plan was the basis for the zoning code in a lot of ways. So tonight is a great opportunity for residents to provide feedback to the commissioners and also to staff. There's also no time limit in committee session meetings for comment, but I ask if you please try not to monopolize your time so that everyone can get a chance to speak. So with that, I'll move to the first item, which is an authorization to release funds held in escrow. And I will move to consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners approval to release funds held in escrow as improvement guarantees in accordance with Section 135.5 of the Township Code for the following: Bryn Mawr Hospital Master Plan, amount $14,100, and 211 Belmont Avenue LCB Senior Living Development, amount $542,060. Second? Oh, thank you, Commissioner Churchill. Is there any commissioner questions or comment about these items? Okay, any public comment in the room? And Jody, I don't think we had any public comment online or submitted. Okay. With that, I'll call it to vote. And Commissioner Stevenson, since we can't see you but we can hear you, please just say aye or nay when we do these votes. Everyone else, you can raise your hand. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Any opposed?
Aye.
No. All right, Madam Secretary, so that passes unanimously.
A little bit.
Yeah. And we are on to our second item, which is our materials say certificates of appropriateness, but I believe it's just one certificate. The approval of certificate of appropriateness, and I will move to consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners approval of the following certificate of appropriateness as recommended by the Historical Architectural Review Board at their meeting held on April 4th, 2023. 65 Cricket Avenue, Ardmore Commercial Historic District, 2306. Approval to install a halo-lit sign citing Secretary of the Interior's Standard 9. Second? Thank you, Commissioner Churchill again. And at this time, I'll just turn it over if there's any questions or comments that commissioners have for staff. Mr. Pritchard's here to answer questions. Anyone have any questions or comments on the board? Okay, any public comment in the room? And Jody, I don't believe any comment for this either, right? Okay. So with that, I will call this to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand or say aye, Commissioner Stevenson.
Aye.
No. Thank you. Okay, and any opposed?
Better time.
Okay, that too passes unanimously, Madam Secretary. So we will move to the third agenda item, and this is a series of 3 historical commission applications. We sometimes can take these together unless there's any commissioner in the room who may want to remove one of them to handle it separately. And I don't know if anyone wants to pull one off. Commissioner Zello. Okay, what item would that be?
First item,
Okay.
Commissioner McCann.
All right, we'll take the other 2 first then. And I will move to to consider for recommendation of the Board of Commissioners approval of the following applications as recommended by the Historical Commission at their meeting held on March 27, 2023. First one is 1862 Aloha Lane in Gladwyne, Class 2. Approval to renovate a garage, including the enclosure of a front-facing overhang, the installation of new garage doors, and replacement of historic windows, citing Secretary of the Interior Standard 9, with a subcommittee to review clarifications and additional details. And the second one is 501 Mulberry Lane in Haverford, Class 2. Approval to remove a non-original bay window, fill the window opening with brick, and create 2 new window openings on either side of the present location of the bay, with a subcommittee to review details of window trim and sills and the method of cutting of brick. And the second, Vice President Gavin, thank you. Any commissioner questions or comments about these 2 items? Okay, any public comment in the room about these 2 items? And I don't think we have anything online about that. So with that, I will call this to a vote about, again, this is just 1862 Aloha Lane and 501 Mulberry Lane. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, and thank you. And then any opposed? Okay.
I'll abstain.
Okay, so that's 11 in favor, 1 abstention, I think.
2 abstentions.
2 abstentions, okay. And no opposed. Okay, and now with that, we'll move to the first item here. This is 210 Cuyler's Lane in Haverford. It's a Class 2 assignment, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Pritchard if he can give us a brief presentation on the property.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner McKeon, and good evening, everybody. So this application is for the full demolition of this circa 1886 carriage house located in Haverford. A little bit of context. So Gray's Lane is in the foreground here. Cuyler's Lane is a private road that comes off of Gray's Lane. The carriage house is located, again, at 210 Cuyler's Lane. It was originally associated with the home at 220 Cuyler's Lane, but it is currently owned by the resident of 250 Gray's Lane. So there was a shift in the property lines at some point. The carriage house retained its own address. It has been disused for a number of years, and it was found to be by the applicant in a condition that's structurally unsafe. A little bit of more history. We found a 1940 aerial view showing the carriage house as it appeared at that time, and a reference from 1886 noting the original architect and owner. Some views of the building from multiple sides. Now from the exterior, it looks pretty good. It looks like it's in pretty good shape, but the applicant did provide structural assessments of the building. First, determining that it was unsound. The commission actually did not believe that the original report contained sufficient information to make a recommendation. They asked the applicant to provide a more comprehensive study, which they did the following month. The commission read that and understood in more detail what the condition of the building was. And so here's some images from that report showing things like collapsed floor joists, evidence of termites, and bulges and cracks in the stone foundation walls. The applicant also, as part of the historic resource impact study that we require for all applications of this scale, the applicant provided documentation, both photographic and scaled drawings of the resource, which the commission appreciated and believes is sufficient documentation to preserve a record of the resource. If we can't preserve the resource, at least we can preserve this documentation of it. With the help of both the township's records and the Historical Society, which is really the appropriate repository for these things. So the commission's recommendation was to not delay the application to demolish this building. They understood with that second report the condition of the building and believe that that was a proper course of action. They don't like to see any Class 2 buildings demolished, but this is a case where they understand that the feasibility of restoring the building is probably beyond what anybody would be willing to do.
Okay, thank you. Just to get a motion on the floor, I will move to consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners approval of the following application recommended by the Historical Commission at their meeting held on March 27, 2023. 210 Cuyler's Lane, Haverford, Class 2, 2023 D-07, to recommend to fully demolish an 1886 carriage house that was previously associated with an adjacent property, with the applicant to provide additional photographs during demolition to staff and the Lower Merion Historical Society, and to consider retaining portions of all of the stone foundations, walls, if safe, and feasible to maintain as a ruin and record of the historic resource. A second, thank you, Commissioner McComb. Any commissioner questions or comments? No. Commissioner Zelov.
Thanks, Commissioner McKeon. This property is in my ward. It's no doubt a attractive, interesting, and aesthetically pleasing carriage house. The Historic Commission has done its job. They've done what we asked them to do. They thoroughly reviewed the structural integrity of this building in 2 separate meetings. And we have advisory boards for this purpose. It's a lot of detail. They had an engineer's report. They were not so happy with the first report because it was too general, and they asked a series of written questions. Greg, I presume all of those written questions were answered to their satisfaction the second time?
Yes, all of the Commission's concerns and questions were addressed with the submission of the second report.
The chair of the Historical Commission, who has served for a long time, we all know him, Christian Bush. He is an extremely dedicated public servant. He and I spoke. He said it's about the process. We didn't get enough information. We need more. They got it. They've made a recommendation. So I will reluctantly support this. I'm not going to second guess the detailed work that the Historic Commission has done. One other observation is this very interesting carriage house is not viewable from the public way. I didn't know it was there. The neighbors knew it was there. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Zelov. Any other commissioner questions or comments? President Sinai.
Thank you, Commissioner McKeon, and I'm not going to disagree with Commissioner Zelov, though I'm always alarmed when a historic resource of any class is in deteriorated condition. And I was just curious, like, whose responsibility was to maintain this? Or we sort of, yeah, I guess that's the question. Well, it's not clear to me which property it belonged to. And
yes, well, the owner of the property on facing Gray's Lane currently owns the carriage house. My understanding is that the building hadn't been used for any function for quite some time, so we didn't have, for example, a housing officer inspect an apartment there. Visibly from Cuyler's Lane, even though it's a private road, it appears to be in good condition, but again, inside it was proved to be deficient in a number of ways. So
I will support this in part out of deference to the Historical Commission, in part because it's not visible from the public way, and in part because it's Class 2. There's nothing much we could do about it anyway, other than delay it for longer, and the thing's going to fall down, and like might as well take it down before it falls down accidentally. Though I will register my disappointment that we have designated historical resources in the township that have deteriorated. Because it strikes me that whether you're using it or not, it's the property owner's responsibility to maintain the structures on their property. Thank you, Commissioner McKeon.
Commissioner McKeon, can I just respond to
certainly.
one point, if that's, I know it's out of order.
Well,
but
Commissioner
that's
Zelov,
okay.
as the ward commissioner, yes, please.
Thank you. President Sinai, it's a very good point. I just want to point out the property owner is new. So the property owner acquired this property within the last 2 years. So I think it's a safe assumption that deterioration occurred during the some 50-year ownership of the prior owner.
I will duly direct my frustration to that owner. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure that owner is still with us.
Yeah.
So.
Vice President Cameron.
Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. Greg, just one question for you. The words "to consider." Two of my least favorite words that come in front of us very often. What it says is to consider retaining portions of all or all of the stone foundation walls, if safe and feasible, to maintain as a ruin and record of the historic resource. Obviously, if it's not safe and it's not feasible, do not do it. If it is safe and feasible, are we saying they should keep it, or are we saying they should consider keeping it if it's safe and feasible? And what are those considerations in that situation?
They should consider it if it's safe and feasible. It's not, the motion doesn't word it as a requirement, but it's something that, once you take off the upper part of the building, then they would be able to assess the structural stability of that stone foundation wall, and at that point, the owner may realize, well, that might be, a feature of the property that we could maintain. It's kind of a banked building, so it's built into a hillside. They may decide that, instead of leveling off that hill or putting up a retaining wall, it would be easier to maintain that shell of that brick, or rather stone first level. So it's more to put the idea in their minds rather than to require something that may not be feasible in the first place.
Okay. To me, there's no point in putting a condition in saying, yeah, if you want to keep it, keep it. If you don't. I don't know why that would even be in here. I understand your point. It puts it in their mind. Obviously, they've been in front of the Historic Commission. That should put it in their mind. Personally, I don't think it should be in here. If Commissioner McKeon would want to accept as a friendly, I don't think it matters one way or another. If he wants to accept as a friendly amendment, just a period after Historical Society. If not, then I'll leave it be and not make a bigger deal out of it. But I do hope that moving forward, we really consider looking at to consider. It is something that really has no value whatsoever for the most part. So if you will accept it as a friendly,
Vice President Gavin, I absolutely would. So basically, everything from the words "and to consider" retaining portions would be removed. And the reason I would support that as a friendly amendment is for the reasons you cite. These are, if we're talking about ordinances, it should be shall instead of may, where you have the option. And I think it's fair to put these ideas in the minds of people, but I don't know how you would do that. How you do that as an ordinance? Yeah, that's why it's tough.
As a matter of history, if I may, we've done this before. There have been a number of occasions where people have done just this. They've considered it, and they have been sensitive to the historic nature of property, and they have preserved things. We can't require it. We can't use the shall. Therefore, I imagine the historical group, the commission had stated, look, if you're able to retain it, and maybe this property owner said yes, maybe they said, all right, we'll figure it out when we get there. But it does happen from time to time. And while I appreciate what you're saying, Vice President Gavin, as a matter of drafting purposes, if you had that as a contract, it would be meaningless because you couldn't, there's nothing to enforce. But here, under these circumstances, Greg, you probably have experienced it yourself, where there have been situations where property owners have preserved that which they can preserve, predicated upon a request to do so.
Sure, and I think that's just, the way it's worded is a way to put that request into writing in a formal way. That's not a requirement, but we hope you do something or hope you consider doing something.
All right, so Vice President Gavin,
is it worth it?
Yeah. No, well, that's the point. But it is worth it that we see this time and time again where it's not appropriate. And to consider it's not strongly enough, we see it in conditions over and over and over. And I think it makes our ordinances weaker. I think it makes our conditions weaker. And so I think it is important in that regard.
And not to belabor and go back to back, because I know we don't like to do this, I think in certain land development aspects, you're 100% correct. In this situation, this may be one of those outliers where this makes sense. So anyway.
I disagree, but okay.
So, President Sinai?
Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. So I appreciate the spirit of, whenever staff can negotiate a shall, we should negotiate a shall. I would ask Manager McNeely, under what conditions can we actually put shall in, and when does it have to be considered, because we cannot require them to agree?
Yeah, this is one of those cases where we can't require them to keep this rubble of a foundation if they choose not to. Once we approve the demolition, they're allowed to demolish the building. So.
And if they agreed in advance, could it be a shall?
If they agreed in advance, it could be a shall if they had, perhaps offered that up as a provision, but that has not occurred here.
Well, I get the sense from the board overall that a lot of my fellow commissioners are not in favor of the language proposed by Vice President Gavin, which I viewed as friendly. So at this point, let me ask Madam Secretary, can I retract my, okay.
Sure.
And I'll retract the amendment altogether. It's not worth spending another minute on.
Right. All right, with that, any other commissioner questions or comments? Okay. Public comment in the room?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Philip Press. I am the next door neighbor who resides at 230 Grays Lane. Your questions are probative, insightful, and I thank you for your vigilance. Commissioner Zelov, in particular, you are extremely proactive, and I've never met you in person, but thank you for communicating. You are Johnny on the spot, and bravo. I just have a few questions because I've learned more in the last 5 minutes than I have in the 2 roughly years that I've lived at 230 Grays Lane. Reference was made to the owner of 250 Grays Lane. Have we established who the title owner of 250 Grays Lane is?
Oh, Mr. Press, so you get time for public comment. You make your comments, and when you're done, the board will answer right as we can, and staff. So, okay. So get out all your questions now.
So that's my first question. My belief is that it's owned by a subsidiary, and the purchaser is a developer. So my question is not whether or not homes that are termite infested should be remediated. Obviously they should. My questions are more towards, for what purpose is this being demolished? In the time that I've lived next door with no welcome note or any communication whatsoever, a number of very large trees have been clear cut. My wife, right, it was when the Phillies were in the World Series, walked over to deliver candy to the children next door, and then a day later, fencing went up, which spans the perimeter. And when I say fencing, it's, I'm roughly 6 feet tall. It's probably maybe a little shorter than I, but I've seen less prohibitive fencing on federal prison camps. So the reason I'm putting these anecdotal facts in are I'm in an information deficit. Obviously, I believe in the full right and the alienability of land, and person purchases property should, as long as it's in conformity with the land use code and the community, by all means proceed. But because a fence has gone up, because a number of trees have come down, because there has been no communication whatsoever, because I've learned more in the last 5 minutes than I've known in the last 2 years, that's why I'm here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment in the room?
Hello, Adrian Seltzer. I do understand that this property is a new owner on this, but my question, and it has to do with the property that's in my neighborhood, the Knox home, which is also Class 2 property. Why was nothing done in the 50 years plus before this person bought this to make sure that that property wasn't deteriorating and being kept in such a position that it needs to be demolished now? The same with the Knox home. Over the winter, the windows were open there. And there's been several things going back and forth with what's happening with that property. And it took about 2 months to get them to close the windows. And, that is something that deteriorates a property when it's open to the weather. What does the board do? What do the ordinance say to keep a property in proper repair so that X amount of years later, we don't lose another property.
Thank you. Any other public comment in the room? See, and Jody, we have anything online or nothing in email, right?
No, no online.
Okay. And I'll just see if, in terms of response to public comment, I think Mr. Press asked who the owner was at 250 Grays Lane, if we knew why it was being demolished, and Ms. Seltzer asked how it was allowed to deteriorate. So if staff's able to comment on those questions.
Yeah, the owner and resident of 250 Grace Lane was present at the Historical Commission meetings, and they have indicated to us that they have no plans to redevelop that lot where the carriage house is located. It would, our understanding is that it would be difficult to build there because there's a sizable sewer easement on that property as well. So, yeah, as far as we know, there are no plans to build there.
Thank you. Any Commissioner response to public comment? Commissioner Zeloff?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner McKeon, and thank you, Mr. Press. Good to meet you from a distance. I would invite you to join Chris Leswing and I on a call in the coming days. Another neighbor has asked similar questions to the ones you're asking this evening. Greg touched on the response, but we can go through it in some more detail. We'll set something up.
Thank you, sir. Okay. President Sinat.
Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. I just wanted to respond to Ms. Seltzer's question because I had asked Manager McNeely when I leaned over and whispered to him with the very same question, which is like, how does this thing, do we have any authority to inspect, designated properties, like which we just go every year, and they're private properties and we do not, and that's therein lies the issue. We just don't have any right to go into people's houses, even if they're historically designated, to check and make sure they're being kept up, and therein lies the problem. Though I share your pain. Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Any other Commissioner questions or comments? I'll just note that I checked with the Ward Commissioner for the Knox home, who had mentioned that the Knox home, which is really a link to Wynwood's Agrarian, passed as a Class 1 home, so or Class 1 resource. That can also be a reason for difference. So with that, I'll call this a vote. And just so we're clear, this is 210 Cuyler's Lane, and this is the motion as written in the packet. None of the language was struck in that. So all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. And any opposed? Abstain. Okay. So, Madam Secretary, that passes unanimously with Commissioner Churchill abstaining. So that brings us to agenda item number 4, which is the approval of appointments to the Historical Commission. And with that, I will move to consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners approval of the following appointments to the Historical Commission. David Weiss is a member for a 5-year term, such term to expire April 2028. Martha Moffett is a member for a 5-year term, such term to expire April 2028. Bart Whit-Stanley as an alternate, and Michael James as an alternate. Are there any Commissioner questions or, and second, thank you, Vice President Gabbard. Any Commissioner questions or comments? Okay, and any public comment in the room on this item? And I don't think we got anything online. I'll just note as the chair of the Ad Hoc Nominations Committee, I've had the opportunity to interview Martha Moffett and Bart Whit-Stanley recently. There are 2 new additions to our advisory boards. Commissioner Stevenson and Whalen also were involved in the interview process with the committee. Ms. Moffitt's a resident of Merion Station. She's a historic preservation consultant, and she's worked with the Delaware Historical Society. And Mr. Whit-Stanley's got a background in preservation and renovation. He's a Penn Valley resident. He can read architecture drawings, and he's designed safety features for historic buildings. The Ad Hoc Nominations Committee will be doing interviews in the near future for the Environmental Advisory Council, Shade Tree Commission, and Human Relations Commission. So we typically get a wealth of very qualified applicants. And so if you're interested, please put your hat in the ring. And I think it's always good to apply for multiple positions if you have that kind of interest. So with that out of the way, I'll call this to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. And yeah, sorry. Any opposed? Okay, and that, Madam Secretary, passes unanimously. That brings us to agenda item number 5. This is a conditional use application for 917 Merion Square Road in Gladwyne, Ward 1. And Ms. Doyle, you're going to give a presentation for it? Or? Yes, sir. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. I will be presenting the conditional use hearing and the findings from that hearing and for your recommendations. Again, this is 917 Merion Square Road in Ward 1 in Gladwyne. Tonight we'll be considering the conditional use application under an incentive that's created specifically for homes within the historic district. This one specifically allows for a 15% encroachment within setbacks as well as 15% impervious coverage. So the plans here, this property here, before we go into the plans, is actually located in the southeasternmost portion of the historic district. And so in such is also adjacent to Gladwyne Park. And the properties both adjacent to it that it would affect the most is actually outside of that Gladwyne Historic District. Here's a couple of views of the property just to give you an idea. This is a Class 1 home. There's been a lot of improvements that have been kind of renovate the home to bring it back to its original character. This is located right along the frontage here. Notice the curbing along the property as well. This is a little further down Merion Square Road. This would be almost adjacent to the property owners. You can see the property is sloping down towards the adjacent neighbor. And then finally, there's a view from the access road that would go to the school and the park, and you can notice how that deck that would be removed, that's proposed to be removed, would be affected. Here are the elements that are proposed to be removed through demolition. Notice obviously the wood deck there. Also some existing stone, which we would consider impervious coverage, as well as the driveway and some portions of a walkway as well. So the improvements here, before we go into the numbered improvements, you can note that that southwestern portion of the property actually already encroaches within the setback, the side yard setback there, and that is the most, it goes in within 12 feet, but that's already an existing nonconformity. But then you'll also notice that as we go through the construction plan here, that the area noted as 1 actually lies within approximately 2.5 feet of that beyond that property line, but is within that 15% threshold that is allowed through the incentive. Also with the proposal will be wood deck, new asphalt, and number 4 there, that underground stormwater basin. Just to give you an idea of how this addition will appear, I've included some elevations. I know this is also included later in Greg's presentation as well, so I don't want to get too involved in that unless you do have questions. But again, these are the elevations from the proposal. So after the Planning Commission meeting, where they had reviewed recommendations for the plan, it ultimately went to a conditional use hearing on March 9th. And there were a number of 4 broad conditions that were suggested and then later included through the conditional use application. After reviewing the conditions themselves, staff has provided some recommended amendments to those conditions. The first being the applicants shall provide a means to guarantee the permanent protection of historical integrity of the subject resource, such as the establishment of a conservation easement or appropriate covenants in form of acceptable to the township solicitor, and we would take out the portion that the claims that has already been provided. That would be something that we would need in the future, but not at the time. The second just includes, for consistency, and you'll notice this in several of the others, that instead of the applicant, should be applicants, shall implement stormwater management measures as, and then we included required by the applicable code provisions, and shall address the stormwater management comments from section 1A, 1E on page 6 of the staff report that we've included, again dated from February 27th of our Planning Commission meeting, and that would be to the satisfaction of the director of the building planning. The third, we thought that just revising the entire code, or the required condition would be the best. And so we included instead, the applicants shall provide additional plantings between the addition and the side property line to supplement the existing plantings along the property line to the satisfaction, again, of the director of building and planning. And then finally, this is a minor correction to the condition where it includes applicants. So again, we're asking for your recommendation for the conditional use for that incentive that's provided through the Historical Resource Overlay District.
Thank you. Okay, and I'll, just to get a motion out there, get something on the table, I will move to consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners approval of a conditional use application. The applicant seeks conditional use approval pursuant to Zoning Code Section 155-7.1H(a) to allow for a modification of one of the side yard setback ranging from 17.2 feet in the rear and 18.6 feet at the front in the area of the proposed addition. B, to allow for a modification of the setback by up to 15%. And then I'll also add C, if this is sufficient, with 4 amendments provided by Township staff on April 12, 2023. Second, yeah, thank you, Commissioner Kramer. And I'll just note the background. I know we've had a few conditional use applications recently. Conditional use is much different than a variance. A variance is someone wants something not contemplated in the code. The conditional use, the specific conditional use that the applicant wants, this is listed in our code. These are put in the codes to try and further certain goals that the township have. Here, it's a goal for a historic resource to make it so that it can be used and developed. And in order to accommodate that, we put certain language in our code that can allow for flexibility. Here it's a setback. So legally, as long as the conditional use criteria is satisfied, we are obligated essentially to accept the application. So with that, I will ask for any commissioner questions or comments. Let's see. Commissioner Bernheim.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm familiar with the property and the property owners who I see are sitting here in the back. And to sort of leapfrog off of a comment from Commissioner Zeloff earlier, we do assign certain tasks to be it commissions or others, and here we have a zoning hearing officer that's also given us, or a conditional use officer, that's given us an excellent write-up on this and the reasons for which we ought to accept the recommendations with the add-ons that have been mentioned here this evening. I think we've had a good presentation about this. It makes sense to go forward, and I think this will actually enhance the property, and knowing the property owners, they will make it look first rate. So I hope everybody supports this.
Thank you, Commissioner Burnham. Any other Commissioner Zeloff?
Just to simply add, Commissioner McKeon, that the incentive in our code is working. We desire historic preservation, and we provide an incentive for that. In this case, a reduction in the setback, and in exchange, we get a permanent preservation easement on a historic structure. It's a win-win.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any other? President Simon.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner McCann. I would be remiss if I was going to complain about a lack of maintenance of a historic resource from a previous owner in a previous application. I should commend a dedication to a historic resource in this. I think this is exactly the kind of thing, as Commissioner Zeloff said, we try and encourage in the code. But it's refreshing to see a property owner of a historic resource consistently over time being true to that historic resource and going above and beyond really what our code is asking for in terms of, like, even with the addition, making it complementary to the historic structure, and not even taking advantage of all the incentives that are in the code, but only just of what is necessary to accomplish this task. So I'm delighted to support this as well.
Thank you. Any other commissioner questions? Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you. It's more of a point of information about stormwater management. My understanding is that if there was an addition of over 1,500 square feet, that some stormwater management requirements kick in, and I don't think that this rises to that. But is there still are they required to provide some kind of relief?
The purpose of this was more because of where the location of the addition is located to the adjacent property. It slopes down pretty far, so what they've done is they've put in some stormwater management to mitigate the proposed addition that would create additional runoff, so that would actually be diverted to the other portion of the property.
Does that rise to a 25-year stormwater management or 2 years? Okay. And again, my question is, just refresh my recollection that if there is it 1,500 square feet addition, that certain stormwater management rules, regulations kick in, but it doesn't apply to this property?
No, it wouldn't apply to this property itself, but these were mitigation measures that were proposed by the applicant themselves.
Am I right?
You know our code as well as anyone. Sure. All the new
We're in trouble.
Any new addition that's over 1,500 square feet triggers a requirement for stormwater management.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Churchill. Any other commissioner questions or comments? Okay. Any public comment in the room on this application? And Jody, I don't think we had anything online, right? Okay. All right, so with that, I will call to vote. All in favor of approving this application with the amendments provided by staff, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevenson. Okay, and any opposed? Okay, Madam Secretary, that I believe passes unanimously. The next item, this is number 6 in your packet. This is approval of the certificate of appropriateness for 917 Merion Square Road, so the property that we just had in the prior application. And to get things going, I will move to consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners approval of the following certificate of appropriateness as recommended by the Historical Architectural Review Board at their meeting held on February 7th, 2023. A 917 Merion Square Road, Gladwyne 23-04, approval to construct an attached garage with family room, citing Secretary of the Interior Standard Number 9. Second, thank you very much, Commissioner Bernheim. Tarek, do you have anything more for the presentation, or right, we're pretty much covered it?
No, I think it pretty much covered it.
All right, any commissioner questions or comments? And any public comment in the room? Okay, no, we didn't have any public comments submitted, so with that, I will call to vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Oh, Commissioner Stevenson, we can see you now. Okay. And any opposed? All right, that too passes unanimously. And this brings us to our penultimate agenda item. This is number 7. This is an authorization to advertise a proposed ordinance, Chapter A180, Historic Resource Inventory, 335 Writers Ferry Road, Bala, Cynwyd, Ward 9. And to get something on the table, I will move to consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners authorizing the Township Secretary to advertise a public hearing and notice of intent to adopt an ordinance to amend the code to the Township of Lower Merion, Chapter A180, Historic Resource Inventory, to add 335 Writers Ferry Road to the Historic Resource Inventory as a Class 2 resource. Second? Oh, thank you, Commissioner Kramer. And are there any Commissioner questions or comments? Any public comment in the room? I know we did receive some public comment online. Okay, and I'll note that Ms. Gillen wrote with the proposed language amendments to specify the contributing features as they relate to the addition of 335 Writers Ferry Road to the Historic Resource Inventory. I don't know if you've got anything to add or, okay.
I hope it was read, sir.
All right, it was. Okay. Yeah, Commissioner Gavin, or Vice President Gavin, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Commissioner, whatever.
Yeah. Who cares?
Greg, as I read through the briefing, this seems like a very important property for the township. It's listed as a Class 2. I get to hit all my highlights tonight. In addition to consider, I get to talk about the relative lack of protection for Class 2 historic resources versus Class 1. We saw it earlier before where we couldn't force preservation of the ruins. We could only suggest it. Big difference between Class 1 and Class 2. Why is this a Class 2 versus a Class 1 historic resource?
Well, simply because the owner of the property only applied for Class 2 designation. The Historical Commission found that the property was eligible under 4 criteria in the code, which technically would make it eligible for Class 1 if that were the application, but that was not the application.
Did we ask the applicant if they were interested in making it a Class 1 historic resource?
We did not.
Okay, as a next step, if I wouldn't want to do that tonight, and discussions have been had. Is this something we could consider and talk to the applicant about?
A property can always be upgraded from one class to another,
Okay.
or just as easily as it can be listed or delisted from the inventory.
And it can be upgraded even if the owner of the property is not in favor of doing so.
Right. Of course, they have a chance to comment and to voice their concerns about such a designation, if that's the case. But such an application can be considered by the commission.
Okay. I would ask if you would have those or have somebody have those conversations with the owner about making this a Class 1 historic resource. I don't know the property itself, but again, from everything I've read and from what you've said, that may be very well worthwhile.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioner questions or comments? Okay. All right, so with that, call this to a vote as well. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay. You're abstaining. Commissioner Whalen, who just got here, you'll abstain. Thank you. And that brings us to our last item for the Building and Planning Committee, and that is a presentation of the draft Ardmore Master Plan. So turn it over to Ms. Dirks now.
Just 1 second while I get our presentation up. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. I am excited to be here tonight to talk about the Ardmore Master Plan. Staff has been working hard over the last 12 months, and we are joined here by Laura, the consultant from Kittleson, who has assisted us on this process. I'm going to provide a brief overview of the master plan, but myself, Chris Leswing, as well as Laura, are available for questions. I don't want to bore you with too many slides, but I want to make sure you have all the information you want. Throughout this process, we have heard at almost every meeting the question, what is a master plan? And we always say it's a dynamic, long-term planning document. But really, I think, and I apologize if you heard me say this before, but it's really a where are we, where do we want to be, and how do we get there document. The kinds of improvement, the kind of recommendations that are included in master plans include policy, zoning, and capital improvements. Those are things that we typically see in master plans. And for this master plan, we really walked into this process looking to articulate a vision for the commercial corridor in Ardmore, to reevaluate the community's priorities around community character, circulation, new development. And also integrate recent and planned developments with new multimodal improvements and public realm enhancements. So those were really the 3 things that we were hoping to get out of this planning document that we started in spring 2022. So we are now at the end of this process right here, although today felt like spring. And it is spring. We are here with this draft of final document before you. Throughout this 12-month process, we were guided by a steering committee that was comprised of local stakeholders. The steering committee met 3 times throughout this process to provide guidance. That happened in the spring, summer, and also this past fall. We've also the staff has been working to update the Planning Commission throughout this process 2 times, as well as the recent reviews they've done of the draft. Also, staff has taken on what I consider to be a robust public engagement agenda for this process. I know when we first started talking about the Ardmore master plan, there were a lot of questions about how the community was involved. And we really took that on as something that we wanted to do well. We had both a visioning charrette that was held last spring, as well as a draft recommendations workshop. Both of those, we really went out into the community. We kind of talked about, as much as we all love being in this boardroom, there was a great advantage to going out to the community and hearing their comments outside this building. So those were the two main events that we did, but we also did a lot of really small events, and really our approach was to kind of meet the community where they are. We went to civic associations. When we talked and decided we hadn't heard from certain groups, we made sure that we visited the civic associations. We did a happy hour. We did a breakfast with business owners. We also did. We also worked with the Mainline Ministerial Alliance to do a community meeting in September at the Ardmore Avenue Community Center. And most importantly, we did Pizza with a Planner, which made planning staff available to answer questions every Thursday throughout December, and kind of an office hours kind of opportunity for people to come in, drop in, ask questions, and for staff to provide feedback and take comments. So the plan is really broken down into 7 different sections: overview and background, public outreach, strengths and weaknesses, vision and susceptibility to change, policies and strategies, as well as strategic public investment, and then conclusions and next steps. As part of that existing conditions analysis, really the where are we did a SWOT analysis that is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that came directly from the community. And I will not read through all of this, but it is in the plan. And moving forward from that analysis, we had 3 main buckets that we felt that recommendations fell into: strong economic vitality, vibrant and sustainable public realm, safe and convenient multimodal connections. And from there, the master plan includes policies and strategies, and those are really surrounding zoning recommendations, parking strategies, affordable housing strategies, and retail strategies. The plan also contemplates strategic public investments. And through that, there are toolkits of different options to include how to address those needed interventions. I think this is a display of the multimodal toolkit, but there are several included in the plan. The plan also includes what we call concept plans. These are really showing how these strategies will come in place on the plan. These are just concepts. I know some people had concerns when they saw some of them, but it's just an idea of what those policies, what those strategies look like when they are, or what they could look like when they are put in place. The Planning Commission reviewed this at their February 27th meeting, and also made a recommendation at their April 10th meeting. From that, there were 14 recommendations that staff worked with them to craft. They are listed in your issues briefing. I'm happy to go through them, but we feel as though they touch upon most of the recommendations that staff had. We also had additional recommendations that is included in your briefing about adding additional backgrounds, enhancing the vision that's outlaid in the plan, updates the susceptibility to change map, housing, parking strategies, and traffic calming pedestrian infrastructure, as well as recommendations on the implementation plan. And I'm happy to give you more information about that. I do want to touch upon the zoning. I know that has been the primary topic that has been talked and communicated to staff and has been the subject of public comment. Staff's aware that there's community concern about height and increased density. What's included in the master plan? This is a guiding document that are for consideration. It's not proposed. These don't result in actual changes, but it's something for planning staff and for the board to consider as we move forward. Planning staff feels really strongly that zoning can be a good tool to effectuate change, but especially in this situation, it should be a precision tool. It's not a blanket overlay. And so we kind of move forward with that understanding, and we really feel that the Planning Commission represented this with their recommendation about future zoning overlays, which is included in your briefing and is also available here in the presentation. So with that, that is my very brief presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And I just want to say that I felt so supported during this process by so many of the commissioners that participated and really showed an effort to get their community members out and make sure their community members' voices were heard. And I think the one thing that really came across was just a really strong intent from the community to want good things for Ardmore. They cared deeply about Ardmore, and maybe we have different opinions about how we get there, but there was really that communication to staff that community members love living here and they want to see Ardmore be the best it can be. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Chris is available, as well as Laura.
Thank you. So what we'll do going forward for this item, the next feature will be public comment. And we'll go to public comment in the room first, so everyone who's been waiting patiently in the room, you'll be able to talk next. Then we'll do public comment that was submitted via email or online. Then after that, it's the commissioner's turns. We could do commissioner questions, commissioner comments, and commissioner response to public comments. So the goal is to try to streamline everything into these two sessions. And again, this is a discussion item only, so there is no vote tonight. So when we're done talking, we're done. So with that, is there any public comment in the room?
Good evening.
Oh, you should use the other. Yeah, I'm sorry. You should use the other podium. That's the staff podium. Sorry about that.
It's confusing because I used that one last time. So.
Yeah, I didn't even realize. Andy told me.
Good evening. My name is Pete Staz. I'm with Core Development. We're the developed 65 Cricket Flats. Some of the things that Jillian talked about, I was on the steering committee, one of the folks on the steering committee. It was a long process, a lot of community involvement, a lot of discussion. And I did feel involved in that discussion that, generally speaking, people wanted to make Ardmore a better place, and that was we didn't always agree on how to do that, but that was the underlying vibe and discussion in the meeting, which is always a great thing to be part of. But I'm here to talk about our experience with our perspective as a building owner and a developer. We do spend a lot of time at Cricket Flats as the owner of the building. As owners, we're typically there either once a week, every other week. So we do take into town and really think about, we think about it as opportunities and how can we continue the vibrancy that's already been created in Ardmore. But I'm here to kind of talk about the development and the development side of it. And I'll give you an example with Cricket Flats. As many of you may have known, that was originally an auto body shop in two buildings that were really not economically viable. They had multiple floor levels and they were kind of set back. And it created a pretty significant pedestrian gap. And really there was not, it didn't offer the vibrancy and the walkability that you're looking for in a town center. So we built obviously a 5-story building. It has 100% lot coverage, and it used shared parking to lower the amount of parking that was required at the site. And with that, we were, at the urging of some folks in Lower Merion, we entered it for the Montgomery Award and were awarded the Montgomery Award by Montgomery County. And it's referenced as Montgomery County as an exemplary infill project, and we've won some other awards with the project. And we've been 100% occupied on the residential, the retail, we're about 50% occupied and continuing to try to lease that up. So what I wanted to point out is some of the things that the master plan contemplates is how to continue to do what was done at Cricket Flats. And it's not, there's a lot of historic buildings in Ardmore. It's not necessarily knocking buildings down. And I'll give you an example that we walk by once a week is Mido's, which is 5 East Lancaster. That building used to be a 4-story building. It burnt down, and the structure that's there is the original first-story structure. That building, it's 100% lot coverage, and it does not offer any parking at all. And there's an opportunity to make that a kind of a connector and gateway to the train station and a connector to Suburban Square, and connect, you know, the retail at Suburban Square to the other side of Ardmore. And to do that, you'd need to redevelop that building. It wouldn't necessarily mean taking that building down. You could build on top of that building. And you could build a 4-story building or 3-story building on top of that building, making it a 4 or 5-story building. With the current zoning in place, you can't do that. The height of the building, the parking requirements, I think right now there's a 70% impervious coverage limitation. So if we build on top of that building, we can only cover 70% of it. We couldn't cover the entire 100%. So again, the Ardmore master plan contemplates some of these opportunities. There's many other opportunities outside of just taking some of these buildings, like Lucky Girl's another one, which is across the street. Those they just can't be redeveloped under the current zoning. And so I think, as part of the steering committee and being part of the community with our building that's involved, I think there was an example of the zoning that was previously in place that allowed us to do Cricket Flats. This master plan contemplates the opportunity to create more of these developments, which again, it's not necessarily, it's situations in the borough, in the town center where you could build on. It's not necessarily knocking buildings down because it's a historic district. Most of the town is protected. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stats. Anyone else for public comment in the room?
Hi, my name is Caroline Minogue, and I'm the president of the North Ardmore Civic Association. North Ardmore, the building area abuts North Ardmore, and we have some of the planning area in our area. I submitted written comments, but I wanted to read them this evening just to make sure you all heard what the North Ardmore Civic Association had to say. We have been following the development of the Ardmore Master Plan with great interest, and we're grateful that Chris Leswing and Jillian Dirks attended our last meeting to discuss the plan in detail. There are many, many aspects of the plan that we support, including increased sidewalk widths, additional streetscaping, such as adding more trees and planters, along with historically appropriate 10-foot-high pedestrian scale streetlights along Lancaster, Anderson, and other parts of the historic district. One-way circulation around Station Place to enable the expansion of the sidewalk area and additional landscaping and streetscaping conducive to a more cafe-friendly, aesthetically pleasing front door to Ardmore around the new train station. And the creation of a pocket park, which preserves parking around Schofield Plaza, but allows outdoor table space for fermenteria, etc. That said, we are disappointed by the glaring absence of any mention of certain vital issues that we believe must be addressed prior to the plan's acceptance. Specifically, stormwater remediation, traffic and pedestrian safety, and traffic concerns. Not addressing these vital issues in the Ardmore Master Plan merely makes them worse for the residents and properties of North Ardmore, which are directly impacted by what happens in the planning area. We're here not just once a week, but every day. For instance, we note that contrary to the Lower Merion zoning ordinance recently passed, the draft Ardmore Master Plan proposes 6-story approvals in the master plan area. It's claimed with no factual basis that real estate development of less than 6 stories is not financially feasible. We've seen no analysis or data that supports this assertion. These proposed 6-story buildings with 100% impervious coverage, which would include future development of the Bijou Bridal and the Ruby's parking lot land parcels along Montgomery are troubling for several reasons. First, they would further exacerbate the dire stormwater situation currently facing North Ardmore and beyond. Any Ardmore master plan should and must address storm surge remediation so that the tributaries to Mill Creek do not get overwhelmed by runoff from Suburban Square and other impervious spaces along Montgomery Avenue. To permit 6-story buildings with 100% impervious coverage and be silent on stormwater runoff is negligent at best and downright reckless at worst. We point to the washed-out Mill Creek Bridge as an example of what can happen if we fail to adequately manage stormwater runoff into Mill Creek and its tributaries. The draft Ardmore plan should at a minimum contain a position statement on stormwater management to guide future town planners and developers. Second, the proposed increase in height and density allowances envisioned by the current draft of the Ardmore Master Plan are truly problematic for the surrounding residents. We believe the facts on the ground, including the upcoming construction of Kimco's Coulter Avenue project and the Toll Brothers Piazza project along Lancaster between Ardmore Avenue and Greenfield, indicate we are already at a tipping point for potentially causing irreversible, ongoing gridlock traffic through the area, especially during the morning and afternoon rush hours. Lower Merion fire departments and ambulance services already face problematic traffic when trying to reach emergencies, and to add to that density is dangerous and unnecessary. Additionally, increased traffic congestion leads to more pedestrian safety concerns. As Chris Leswing and Jillian Dirks heard from the NACA board and North Ardmore residents at our last meeting, we're already deeply troubled by pedestrian safety concerns in our area. We note that the Ardmore Master Plan has no provisions for the safety of students walking to the high school from downtown Ardmore, and disappointingly does not even address the very dangerous sidewalk situation at Montgomery Avenue and Schoolhouse Lane, which students perilously navigate single file while cars speed unchecked on Montgomery Avenue. We acknowledge the high school is outside of the master plan area, but we note that students walk along Montgomery Avenue to and from the master plan area every day. Other glaring dangerous pedestrian issues that are within the master plan area and not addressed in the plan include the absence of designated crossings on Ardmore Avenue, the dangerous pedestrian crossing of Lancaster at Church Road, the hazardous crossing on Lancaster at the Toyota dealership at the Wynwood Square Target Shopping Center, the dangerous pedestrian walkway on Woodside under the railroad bridge, and the continuing chaos of Anderson Avenue. These dangerous pedestrian areas should be dealt with now. For example, putting in proper pedestrian crossings on Ardmore Avenue could be done rapidly, as could adding a railing along the narrow sidewalk under the Woodside Road underpass. The vice of this planning process is that it continues to kick the can of these urgently needed improvements down the road to some indefinite future. Additionally, it's extraordinary to us that the plan suggests putting a roundabout at the minor intersection of Rittenhouse Place and Cricket Terrace, which is projected to eliminate a precious 25 parking spaces, much to the dismay of Rittenhouse Electric and other local businesses, while the real pedestrian safety issues mentioned above continue to be ignored. With respect to parking, we believe there's been inadequate analysis of the parking situation in Ardmore. Before eliminating parking in Schofield Plaza, there should be a more detailed on-the-ground analysis undertaken to examine parking in Ardmore. The evening parking usage needs to be specifically examined rather than generalizing evening usage based on parking meter utilization during daytime hours. In short, while the current draft of the Ardmore Master Plan has some beneficial aspects, NACA, North Ardmore Civic Association, believes there is room for improvement before it gets accepted or approved. When further refining the plan, the township should also consider coordinating with PennDOT, SEPTA Amtrak, Township Public Works Department, Police Department, and Lower Merion School District to facilitate future implementation of it. Otherwise, the plan risks being a futile exercise. Finally, North Ardmore Civic Association would like 1, proper data and analysis justifying the new zoning allowing 6-story buildings with 100% impervious coverage and no parking requirement. 2, a plan to address stormwater runoff from the development in the planning area. 3, identification of the specific property locations where you propose allowing redevelopment under the proposed new standards with an explanation of why these sites are distinctively ripe for development. For proper parking study with due attention to evening usage to determine what is actually needed before removing much-used spots. And 5, solutions to the traffic bottleneck and pedestrian safety issues in the master plan area, including the 5 areas I already mentioned, and at the railroad crossings of Woodside, Anderson, and Church. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Minogue, and I know that we had your letter from April 10th in our briefing materials, so thank you. Anyone else for public comment in the room?
Adrian Seltzer. When I was at several of the Ardmore Master Plan open houses, there's lots to love about this, but the fact that you want to go back to 5- and 6-story buildings after the community fought so hard in the zoning to get those limits reduced is kind of a slap in the face to the community. So that's all I have to say. We fought hard to make sure that there weren't those buildings that high. And I don't remember quite whether you can have another story if there's a certain amount of affordable housing in it. I think you can go to 4 stories if you have affordable. But to go to 6 and start blocking out the sun is just, nah.
Thank you, Ms. Seltzer. Anyone else in the room for public comment?
Evening, Commissioners. I have rented in Ardmore.
Oh, please say your name and your address, please.
Douglas Fries, 203 Marlborough. I've rented in Ardmore for quite a while. In seeing that this plan was coming along, it made me actually want to live here, and so we bought a house a little while ago, and we're happy to be here. We love walking everywhere, being able to walk to places, being able to bike to places that are useful to us, places where we can buy things. It's been great being here, and I just know that there's so much more room for improvement, and I'm thankful for the things that I see in this plan, and I look forward to them hopefully moving along. Thank you.
And what's your last name? Was it Reese, you said?
Fries.
Fries, okay, thank you. All right, anyone else for public comment in the room? And we did get a lot of public comment submitted through emails and online. And I'll read through some of these here. Michael Pollack of Ardmore wrote about the draft Ardmore master plan, noting concerns about density, development, and height, and in support of pedestrian improvements and traffic calming. Tim Matthews of Haverford wrote with comments about the draft Ardmore master plan related to future zoning overlay, greening, and the procedure for review of the plan. Marlene Klein from Ardmore wrote with concerns about increased building heights, impacts on emergency services, and pedestrian and vehicle circulation as they relate to the draft Ardmore master plan. She noted no justification for increasing the overlay to 6 stories and that the proposed master plan ignored what had happened. And Chris Helly from Ardmore outlined both positive aspects of the draft master plan, traffic calming, Station Road conceptual plan, Shuffle Plaza, Cricket Terrace, and lighting, as well as a number of areas of concern, including the transit overlay zone, Montgomery Avenue development, Suburban Square, Rittenhouse Place, and bike and pedestrian routes. Madam Secretary, do we have anyone else online who wants to participate?
No one has their hand raised online.
Okay. With that, we'll turn it over to Commissioner questions, comments, responses to public comment, and we'll go to Commissioner Stevenson first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I'm not able to be there tonight in person, but I would like to start off by saying that I want to thank all the work that's gone into this, particularly as Jillian outlined, the community engagement. The staff did an excellent job in ensuring that they had an enormous number of opportunities for folks to contribute their opinions and also to get feedback from the township and also hear from the various other stakeholders involved. The approach I'm going to do is I'm not going to do questions. I'm just going to outline my comment piece is more about where those things are that I think are important for us to look at, because this is just an overview as we work as to move forward to a final document. The first one is about the development and height, and bringing in good development is, I think, is important. I would like to say that my friend Pete, who made comments earlier, should be commended, because I think he is a model of the type of development, if we're going to have development in this community. Cricket Flats is an excellent development, and they do a great job there. However, you know, as was said, the concern is we look at, I understand about developers having that want to have height piece, but I also equally understand that the community has concerns about overdevelopment in those heights. And I think that we need to figure out, how do we figure out if there is a need for addressing that in a way where it's a compromise across the board. But, you know, the representation of taking height up without, just for the sake of the development piece, is not a good idea. The second piece to this, I think, that goes along with this is the issue around retail. My concern is that a part of the thing that we encourage, and this is not unique to the Ardmore Master Plan, but as far as the township across the board, one of the major things that we do is we create this concept that we encourage for business and retail on the first floor, and then they're developed. The problem is, and which has been discussed in many meetings amongst commissioners, is that a lot of these places lay empty. And I think one of the things that's missing here is looking at how do we create this economic / community development piece where there is an opportunity for someone who's designated to work with potential retailers and developers around encouraging development. One of the models that I look at that has been a win is right here in the Ardmore, and that's Suburban Square. Suburban Square has a great business plan in which they would tell you that it's hard for them to even find people who they can't turn away, because part of their model is identifying potential folks who would make a good retailer in the particular area. And I think somewhere either we need to identify an individual or consultant or something. I think that is a key component that's missing, because as we look at Ardmore today, some of our retail piece is not some of the things that we want. I mean, the vape shops are now replacing our nail salons. And those are the kind of things that we have to keep in mind if we're looking to try to develop more. We have to also look at how do we attract retailers who are going to be a part of that. The next piece is around looking at the whole issue about traffic calming and walkability. Ardmore is a great destination for folks who want to come into Ardmore for its retail, for its Ardmore Music Hall, and other areas. But in order to do that, we also have a lot of residents who live around Ardmore, and we have to make sure that this plan is addressing a lot of those things, particularly when we look at Ardmore Avenue with the new development of the Piazza. I know there's been conversations earlier about this, but we have to make sure when we look at places like the Ardmore House and other areas that we are addressing those issues and about traffic calming and those and associations to that. That is going to be an important piece to make sure that we are addressing those pieces. The last piece I'll talk about is about the sustainability piece, and I think sustainability / which was talked about is about water management. I think that as we move towards this development, we need to make sure that we are not only looking at this in the sense of looking at it from a business impact, but also how that rolls into the neighborhoods, particularly in the historical neighborhoods, what impact this development and ongoing changes will take of that. I think that's going to be important in order to move forward, to tie this into the sustainability plan, to make sure that those things are intangible as we move forward. I'm going to stop now because I know some other colleagues have things to say, but I thank you for your comments. I look forward to working with staff and the community moving forward.
Commissioner Stevenson, any other commissioners with questions, comments? Commissioner Kramer.
Thank you. Thank you to the staff for doing a great job this entire year on this process. I think it was an excellent process, and you provided a lot of opportunities for everybody to participate. It's been terrific, and I thank everybody in the room who has participated. You know, I think when we talk about increasing density, I think what we need from staff, from the consultant, is real clear explanations of why that's necessary, you know, and specifics, right? Our residents are smart, you know, they want to know the numbers, like why do you need to build this many floors in, you know, in order to make this economically feasible, and what do we get out of it, you know, as residents. Especially when you go to 5 and 6 floors. Obviously people are nervous about that, right? So I think we need to explain clearly. I'd like to know clearly, and not, you know, not ask our residents to take it on faith, but to really break it down. So that's what I'd like to hear about, either now or, you know, and in the future.
I can just respond to that. You know, one of the recommendations from the Planning Commission was to include some of that data, to bake that into the document from how the consultant got there. And specifically the height, there was a financial analysis, and Laura can possibly talk a little bit more about that, because I do know that's one of the biggest topics, height.
Yeah, so just to that point, Sarah Woodworth of WCHA did the analysis around some of that redevelopment, and through conversations with developers and digging more into the numbers that she was looking at, she looked at what could be done under current zoning, under current heights, impervious coverage, and parking requirements. She looked at if you were to increase up to 1 story and do some, but keep and increase impervious, but keep parking the same. And she looked at what would happen if you increased height, reduce the parking requirements, and increase impervious. What she saw in that analysis was that under current requirements, it's just not really economically feasible to build under the current zoning. What that means is for the sites that we've identified in the master plan as potential redevelopment sites, those for the most part tend to be single-story commercial properties with surface parking, more on the edges of Ardmore. Those are unlikely to be redeveloped in the future based on just the economics of those sites. And one of that, to the point about the real benefits that I think are coming to community members, is we heard a lot from community members about the desire for more walkable Lancaster Avenue, wider sidewalks, better streetscapes, things that are not feasible today with the amount of sidewalk width that you have, right? The redevelopment sites that we've identified, there's a very minimal sidewalk that's there. Those parking lots go straight up to it. We do not see an opportunity with those current developments as they are to get the kind of streetscape amenities that community members were requesting. Where we can see that coming in is things like the piazza, where when those are redeveloped, wider sidewalks are done, additional public spaces put in, and you start to get that one side of Lancaster Avenue gets more of that feel that folks were asking for. So what we were looking to do with the redevelopment is pair that existing redevelopment that's already happening with future ones to really leverage that private investment to get the kind of public realm that community members have been asking for. And based on the analysis that was completed, that kind of redevelopment would not be possible under the current height restrictions. But it's not just height, it is impervious and it is parking. I do want to clarify, though, that we aren't saying 100% impervious, we're not saying no parking, and we're not saying 6 stories everywhere throughout the potential zoning overlay. One of the reasons that we left things more open is that we didn't feel that we had gotten the dialogue with community members to get down to that level of detail to say exactly where building heights should be stepping down as you're getting closer to areas like North Ardmore. We didn't get to that level of we know that the sustainability plan is in progress. We didn't get to that level of specificity of what percentage impervious would be appropriate, what kinds of other incentives or requirements could come into new development so that sustainability is being embedded in there. We didn't get to that point yet. So that's why we kept things more general in the master plan to say, in a zoning overlay, these are the types of things that should be considered. Things like increasing building heights, things like mandating the amount of setback that would be required to provide better sidewalks. Things like that are things that should be considered, but need to be delved into in much greater detail, and one of the recommendations being a zoning task force that can really get into that level of specificity so that we're not blanketing the entire overlay area to say this is what it should look like everywhere. There would be a lot of variation in that overlay zone.
Thank you. Commissioner Kramer, other questions or comments?
Yeah, I would just say that if we were to move ahead with the zoning task force for the downtown, obviously lots of community involvement in that, and which I assume that you would do, because I know our staff is great about that. And to get, as specific as the Planning Commission recommended to allay people's fears, to help them understand the economics. Yeah, thank you.
And I'll just add that we will be including in the updated master plan, so that analysis that went in around the economics of redevelopment, that will be included.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Courtney?
Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. I want to reiterate the gratitude to staff that's already been expressed. I think there's a lot to love in here. I really appreciate the members of the community who have participated in this process. It has been very public. We have a very engaged Ardmore and beyond community. And thank you to the North Ardmore Civic Association in particular for the comments that they've provided. I feel like as the representative of Board 5, that what for me, they've hit it on the head. And so I wanted to, a lot of what I'm going to say is sort of question things, and it's going to be a little bit critical, but I don't want to draw away from what's great in here, what's already been stated, but I do feel like I want to start with sustainability. And I want to start by reminding everybody of 2 recent conversations over the past 3 years that I feel like have been missed, and it's very frustrating to me. When we agreed to go with Kittleson, there was a rubric that staff presented, and it didn't include sustainability in the rubric. And I said, why don't we have sustainability in this rubric? And the response that I recall was that Kittleson is great on sustainability. You're going to love what they come up with. And I look in here and I see multimodal transportation and pedestrian improvement, and I don't see anything else. Right? And going back to the zoning code conversation, the reason that town center height, TC1 height, was reduced to 4 stories, at least one of the reasons, was we said we would hold that 5th story in reserve for the creation of an environmental sustainability incentive. And for me, speaking for myself, the only reason that I pushed to do an Ardmore master plan, I won't say the only, but a big reason for me to do this was to get that incentive in place, was to understand not just the economic framework, I think it's great that work has been done, but to get that incentive in place around the height in Ardmore, and it's not here. So I want to know, what do we need to do to get it? Because I thought making this plan was going to get us that incentive, and I'll just say right now, I will not, and I hope no one on this board will support any increase in height in Ardmore without some form of environmental sustainability incentive incorporated into it. So where to go?
I don't know if staff has an answer.
Can I start with just taking responsibility for the first part? The staff's recommendation to hire Kittleson Associates, and we're happy with the work they did. Regarding sustainability, and I think this is something, as planners are looking at this, the idea that people in this community can walk and bike and readily simply drive to a vibrant downtown instead of driving to Center City, driving to King of Prussia, driving to Plymouth Meeting. Building a real town that people feel in is sustainable. We live in an auto-oriented suburb in many ways. Trying to reduce that auto dependency by creating attractions that people can have in their normal everyday life is sustainable. The most unsustainable aspect of Lower Merion Township is our land use pattern. We have a low-density, suburban, auto-oriented land use pattern. That simply changing those realities that people drive less and live and walk and act in a more compact environment changes that sustainability equation. That is what Kittleson has been doing, and that is what our consultant delivered by making many suggestions to improve that built environment to rectify it, that investment in car infrastructure that we have in the township. From some of the other matters of sustainability that you mentioned, we were never very clear about some of that. Are we talking about green roofs? Are we talking about building materials for that fifth floor? In all of the conversations that we've had, and we talked about that tonight, there's been dozens and dozens of conversations with people out in the community. Those incentives, I would say, overwhelmingly came to improving the built environment at the streetscape and adding affordability. Those were what we heard from the community, and that, I think, is what translated into the document. But it's not, as we are here tonight, we're here to continue to refine this document, and if there are specifics and things that we still need to add into that, that's what we're here to do.
So I think it's unfortunate that this proposed zoning overlay is front and center and has taken over so much of the conversation, because based on the conversations that I've had with you over email, this isn't necessarily a thing supported by staff. Would you say that's accurate?
I would say I would agree that the preponderance of public comment about the zoning overlay is distracting us from the real benefits of this master plan of improving walkability and streetscape and building that town-like character that we would like to have. One of the things that hasn't even come up tonight is the idea to create a signature public space in Ardmore. That's town building, right? That's exciting. Improving the streetscape with better trees, better sidewalks, better simply being able to safely cross the street. That's a benefit that we should be focused on. If there is less of a desire, than we've heard this across the board, less of a desire for private development, right? There's this concern about height, there's a concern about density, there's a concern about traffic. We hear this all the time, every week. If we're not going to do that, these other changes are going to be through public investment, right? The previous master plan focused a lot on private redevelopment, and you see some of the benefits of that. We were just talking about Cricket Flats. That property has stormwater management. The improvements over Suburban Square in the last 10 years have stormwater management. The new Piazza development will have stormwater management. Those properties before it did not have that, right? That's improving things going forward.
That's great to hear. My recommendation would be to take that zoning overlay out of the plan until it's more fleshed out, right? It is distracting, and I don't think it's something that we currently support.
The analysis you can't take out, right? That's the planning process, where the analysis that Laura and her team did of looking at our existing zoning and knowing that we will probably not get the redevelopment of certain sites that would improve the walkability of this community without a zoning change, that's just the facts. That should be in there. I think the idea of a zoning overlay or something, we probably know that as a community, if we want to change that, they've laid that out. We will need to revise the zoning. Right. Whatever that is something in this community, as seriously as we take zoning, will be that will be as equally involved a process as we just went through in the last year, if not more so.
So I want to dig on that, and I'll start with, in one of the staff recommendations, I think it was, there was a suggestion of a change in terminology from village to Main Street Town Center. I'm probably mixing that all up. What does that mean, like in concrete terms? If we stop talking about Ardmore as a village, like say Gladwyne or Bryn Mawr, and we talk about Ardmore as a Main Street town center. What does that mean?
I mean, Ardmore is so unique in that it provides services and a commercial area for the local surrounding residential community. But it also is, in some ways, one of the bigger town centers in the region. People come to Ardmore for all kinds of reasons. So I think, kind of acknowledging that it's kind of has a regional draw, but it also has a lot of local needs and residents to provide for. I live in Bala, I come to Ardmore all the time. I know that a lot of township residents also come to Ardmore and see that as one of the township centers.
So I want to go forward with this. I'm hearing conflicting ideas tonight. I'm hearing that we have to change the zoning to get what we need from private redevelopment, but I'm also hearing that we need public investment, right? So I'm reminded of our conversation around neighborhood centers, again, returning to Gladwyne a little bit. And one of the suggestions there, when we're talking about neighborhood centers, was that we should focus on improvement to the existing development, what's there, and not in terms of increasing height to attract redevelopment. And in that conversation I said, well, are there parts of Ardmore that do that? And so what I want to understand is, like, what strategies do we have for improvement in Ardmore besides incentivizing bigger, denser buildings?
So, I mean, that's great. I like this conversation, right? So in the last 20 years, one of the biggest things that the township did that came out of the first master plan was the master plan came on the heels of Ardmore being declared a historic district. Right? So the historic district came in. Then there were design guidelines. And many of the best changes that have taken place in Ardmore have been done through the HARB process. Every month this board sees a number of certificates of approval. Some of them are just for an awning, some of them are just signs, some of them for windows. Every time one of those buildings changes, those design guidelines in the historic district have improved it. A great example is the intersection of Station Avenue, Anderson Avenue, and Lancaster, right? The coffee shop, Pucci Manuli across the way. Those didn't look like that 20 years ago, right? They didn't get redeveloped. They didn't become 5-story buildings. Those design standards and that historic district is a fabulous tool that has helped, right, as projects gone forward. Also, we've seen facade grants that have come in. And in the Ardmore Historic District, the AI, working with the township, has put in $10, $20, sometimes $30,000 to help business owners make their facade improvements. Those qualitative changes have improved the built environment of that section of Ardmore. That didn't take place with a 5-story building. But there are some other areas that you need to apply a different tool to. As Mr. Stas talked about, that area down on Cricket Avenue was an auto body shop. It was an old bar, and there was some other areas there that was underperforming, not very attractive, and certainly an auto body shop in a commercial area isn't necessarily the most desirable use. Changing that through redevelopment in a targeted spot, right? That was a case that on that area, it made sense, and I think at the end of the day, we got a high-quality project that improved that area. It has ground floor retail, and it has high-quality residential above it. So in that case, you're looking to say the vast majority of the historic district, that has a set of tools. But the other areas that are not in the historic district, you would need to have another set of tools for that. The Honda dealership, right? It's just right next door. It's not pleasant to walk in front of. In many places, it's very uncomfortable to walk in front of, right? It has a minimal sidewalk, and it really separates North Ardmore, Wynwood, from the Ardmore Commercial District. So there are many people who have come over the Church Road Bridge that don't feel simply comfortable walking in Ardmore to get there. There isn't a tool that we can say of just, hey, Honda, go fix your sidewalk. It's just not going to happen. It would have to take place through a private redevelopment at some time. But then the community asks the question, what are we willing to balance for that? If we're so dreading the height, we're dreading the traffic, but are we also just dreading not being able to walk in our community? So that's a balance that we will have when we have that future discussion of zoning.
See, this is where I think we disagree, because I think we can say, hey, Honda, fix your sidewalk. Like,
you can't make it wider.
We could tell them to push it back. We can do that.
Not without taking their property. I mean, that would involve, there is no code requirement to say, Honda, you need to provide a 5-foot sidewalk and plant street trees in that area. They would have to take place through some sort of public action to do that. Right.
Public investment in the streetscape. Public investment in...
And probably taking some of their property. That would require eminent domain to do that. Because they have, their sidewalk is, they've built up to their legal requirement. That sidewalk is where it is in the right of way.
Okay. No, I'm looking at my notes, deciding not to belabor certain things. I do want to dig in future iterations of the plan as to why we feel new development is necessary for improvement in certain areas. If you talk about the Ardmore West, like maybe a quarter of a mile from there, we saw a new development right on the Haverford border under the existing zoning code. Like it's coming. Everybody know which one I'm talking about? I'm spacing on the, what is it, 355? 355. Yeah. We saw a new development under that zoning code. I don't think, like I feel like we have a hammer and everything looks like a nail. Like I don't think it's the only way we can improve, right? It's weird to me that Kimco turns away retail tenants, and yet 50 feet away on Anderson Avenue we've had empty storefronts for as long as I can remember, right? I was asked a very pointed question last night in a civic association meeting, and it was, we have several new large developments in Ardmore that have resulted in tax windfalls for the township. And the question was, where is that money going? Why aren't we, the community, seeing the benefit of that? And my concern, and this is now addressed in the board, is it's our fiscal policy. The fact that we haven't raised taxes in over a decade means that the revenue from new development is just being used to keep taxes low and not to improve the services and amenity of our township. And it thus puts our township sort of beholden that any improvement that we want to streetscape, to sidewalks, is going to have to come from new development because we are not investing enough in the improvement of our township. And this plan, I love that it talks about public investment. I think we need to see more focus on that. I would love to see more recommendations coming out about how we can spend this pile of cash that we have. We have $30 million in the bank, well above our stated fund balance policy. And that's not even counting the other $12 million we have from the ARP that we haven't figured out what to do with yet. This community has spoken sort of vociferously on not wanting to have bigger and bigger buildings and more apartments. And I don't think this plan has fully incorporated what's going to happen to Ardmore when the Kimco apartments come on, when the Piazza apartments come on. If it's still talking about how to improve Ardmore, we have to build bigger buildings. I think public investment in our streetscape is the way to go. And so with that, your memo asks for recommendations. I think I've already made my recommendation on zoning. I think a parking committee is a good idea, specifically because I think we have plenty of parking in Ardmore. And we're going to have even more once those developments come in. I hear the need for accessibility, for handicap access. I support parking spaces for that are near business to support small business. But I think in general, you can park in a garage in Ardmore and you don't have to walk more than 2 blocks to wherever it is you want to go. And then the last thing is Schaffel Plaza, sort of finishing on my theme of public investment. I think Schaffel Plaza as a parking lot is a huge waste. I've said this before. This board has twice voted to put design and engineering this year in our capital improvement plan, and we need to move forward with that. I think we don't need that parking, but if in the name of compromise, if it helps to get it through some limited number of spaces for accessibility to support the nearby businesses, we should move forward with that. Thank you all for humoring me.
And Commissioner Cornyn, if I could just finish my response. We're on the same page. And it's one of the things that maybe it's on the front page of the plan, it should really indicate. This is a transformational document in many ways, that these improvements will be, many of them will be achieved through public investment. But there's a cost to the township, and I'm not sure everybody's aware of that. We're going to need to develop that. There is a lot of smaller pieces in here of each intersection being fixed. There was a mention of Church Road and Lancaster Avenue. If that needs to be done through public dollars, right? Those are things that will need to come up, and there'll need to be a long-range plan to be able to fund these over times, the streetscape in Ardmore. Those are things that we need to do to really build a proper town that just doesn't happen by individual property owners doing that, creating the public space, creating the access and things. So I think we're on the same page with that. But if we can be smart, we always are trying to be smart in Lower Merion. If we see an opportunity where something can change and we get better improvements out of that through that change, we will. I don't think we want to discount that, but we're not thinking that that is the primary tool of changing Ardmore. It's really going to be, a lot of this is going to be on the backs of private investment, if the community wants to do that.
From a vision perspective, I would ask that we focus more on Ardmore as a place to be and not just a place to sleep.
Great. We're with you. Good. Thank you. Commissioner Kramer?
Yes, I would like to kind of pick up a little bit on what Commissioner Courtney had to say and maybe express some of my views about some of these issues. We need to have greater density near public transit, near our train stations, if we want to have sustainability. So there is a direct correlation between density and sustainability when we're talking about public transportation. And I guess in my view, height in and of itself is not the issue. We have 5, 6, 7, and higher story buildings all up and down Montgomery Avenue, and also in many other areas of the township. And I think that what we have to focus is on when we're talking about sustainability is sort of the big picture. Sustainability has many different facets, and I would like to know from Commissioner Courtney, not now,
thank you.
But I would like to know from him exactly what sustainability issues should be done, in his view, in exchange for greater height. And I would hope that he will be able to give that to us for consideration as we move forward.
Goal workshop in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Anything more to say? Or
No,
okay,
that's it.
President Steinheck?
Thank you, Commissioner McKeon, and I'll try and keep this high level and brief. But first, I also want to thank everyone who worked on this plan, the consultant staff, my fellow commissioners, people in the community. Vibrant downtowns don't happen by accident. They don't. They don't happen by accident. You can't just sit and hope that it shows up. So it takes planning, right? It takes planning to give a roadmap not only for us, but also for people who might choose to invest in the township, so they have an idea of what's coming down the pike, and so they can take into account what's happening, but they can also have a sense of what the intent is for the future, so they know. And it begs the question of what vibrant is, right? Creating what vibrant, that means different things to different people, and I think generally people think it's active, it's energetic, there are public spaces, it's inclusive, right? That's what a vibrant downtown is. And there's a lot of parts to that, and the plan hits them all, right? And I think one of the things that's good is that this plan, like the sustainability plan, is an encyclopedia of like stuff we can do, right? And it doesn't mean we get to do them all at once. It doesn't actually say how much of one and how much, like what the mix is going to be. It's to a degree, it's sort of like just a list of arrows in our quiver, right? And I think that's really helpful, and I think it starts to outline a vision, and I think that's also really helpful as well. But there are lots of parts to it, and I think the community's comments really hit on some of it, which is it's not just about planning a downtown area. It's also about planning like how people are going to get to that downtown, right? And what are they going to do with their cars once they get there? And how are they going to circulate through that space, and how are they going to circulate safely, right? So, Commissioner Courtney said, you look at Suburban Square. Well, Suburban Square controls its entire environment. It controls the circulation through there. It selectively chooses where it puts its tenants to manipulate how people walk, right? They have things they can do to curate their environment to make it vibrant. That we don't have all those tools. We have a harder problem with them, and we'll try and improve it. And I think this plan gives us a lot of elements to help deal with it. But I agree. I mean, you want to create a place people want to go, right? But then you have to manage all the people who want to go there, right? That is fair. You don't want to have the burden of that fall on the residents. You have to take care of them. I think that is part of our obligation here, is to figure out, if they're going to come by car, how do we park it? Are there other ways people are going to come to the downtown area, right? So that's the first point. I think that is really what the exercise is. The second, is the question of the zoning and specifically the height. And let me say the following. I wasn't on the board then, but I was opposed to must. And I was one of the people who voted to reduce the height in Ardmore. And there was a simple reason for that, which is the thesis back then behind putting the apartment buildings in was what Ardmore needed to get out of the global financial crisis in the aftermath of that was feet on streets. And the way to do that was to park them in apartment buildings near Ardmore, because then they'd go downstairs and they'd be in town, right? That was the thesis of density. That's not what I'm hearing out of staff, and especially not out of the Planning Commission today. What I'm hearing out of staff and the Planning Commission today is that there are some targeted locations for redevelopment that are not going to be economically feasible to be rebuilt to something that will help serve the function of getting people to circulate through Ardmore and turning it vibrant, right? So it's not about putting people in beds. It's about getting a new building in the first 20 feet of that, which is apart from the street that ends up being important, right? And that's what's trying to be great. I'm forgetting who it was who raised the Mido site, right? Like identifying one super important site that if you could change it, like could increase the connectivity between Suburban Square and other parts of Ardmore that people just do not happen to want to walk between, right? That's a super important concept, and this is exactly what we should be focusing on. The plan doesn't have it nailed down yet, but like having arrows in our quiver is important for that. And I agree with what staff said tonight, what the Planning Commission said in the document, which is a blanket rezoning to higher height is something that I do not think is a good idea. What you get then is like building to put places where they're not very useful, but they're easy to build, as opposed to getting the building that you really want in the space that you want, even though it might be hard to do, right? And so when I was opposed to must, one of the commissioners on the board then said, Suburban Square has an 8-story building, right? It does. It's an 8-story building, right? It's fine where it is because there's only one. It's not dominating over anything, and it's just part of the fabric. And I scoffed at that then. I'm like, well, yeah, that's only one, but like must is going to put them everywhere, right? Right? And I think that's a kind of start. Like this should not be about putting tall buildings everywhere, right? That's what it should not be about, in my view. I don't think there's reason for that. But surgically, strategically, tactically, to achieve a specific objective, that streetscape improvements, things to help you cross the street, using public investment to get the kinds of uses that we want in the township in particular spots. Those are things we should consider, I think. Anyway, so that's my high level pitch. So in terms of responding to staff, they asked for reactions. My view is it's a big plan. You have to start somewhere. Schaffel Plaza looks like a anchor, whatever keystone to this, right? Like, it's going to be decades of development. Like, what's it going to center around? What's going to be the gravity that, is the linchpin that everything's going to orient around? I think that's the place to go. What I've learned from observing this is that it's not about just tearing up all the concrete and making it grass, because there are consequences of that. And so a Schaffel Plaza plan also needs to incorporate a parking plan. Hopefully we'll not encroach on it, but we're creating something. And also a circulation of pedestrian, biking, like just make it a more universally accessible area, right? I think that's what, as a township, we would consider to be a gem. The other thing that I just want to react to is what Chris Leswing said about in response to sustainability, and I'm going to gently disagree. So Chris said the most sustainable thing you could do is compact development, and he's absolutely right? But the logical conclusion of that is that the most sustainable thing any of us could do in terms of how we live is to live in Philadelphia. right? Because the thing that is expensive in terms of the environment is spread out development. It is lots of resources connecting houses from each other. Like if density is sustainable, and density is sustainable, like really we should be in cities, which is the most sustainable form of living. It's the most sustainable form, right? I don't think that is something that we are going to get a lot of traction on. Right? I think the idea of saying to people living on the western side of the township, like, you know, really you should just be in clustered developments closer together because that's more sustainable is really what the township is about. We need to find other avenues to do sustainability on, and like that's just not one that we're going to get a lot of traction on. So with that small correction, I'll yield the floor. Thanks, Commissioner McKay.
Thank you, President Stein. Any other commissioner questions, comments? Commissioner Zello.
Thanks, Commissioner McKeon. I think I'll start with, we have two lists of comments, and we have the Planning Commission and we have the staff, and then I'll talk about zoning and height. So the Planning Commission recommendations, number 2, I see it differently. I think separation from non-retail uses works. It works in Bryn Mawr. I don't agree that vacancy, that nothing is, that something is better than vacancy. We have a retail mix plan for Ardmore. We have a retail mix plan for Bryn Mawr. High quality retail is worth waiting for. Nail salons and vaping shops, as we heard from Commissioner Stevenson, are not. And so, and one way to achieve that is through separation requirements. Again, we have that in the Bryn Mawr Village zoning. I agree with Commissioner Courtney that there's lots of parking in Bryn Mawr. Excuse me, in Ardmore, also in Bryn Mawr. But we've got we all know we've got a spanking new parking garage that nobody parks in at 1 Ardmore Place. Signage, getting people, helping people find it will make a difference. And we've got the footers, the foundations for a parking garage next to the new train station in Ardmore that are in place today or maybe tomorrow, but they're going to be there. I just would observe there's a recommendation for a parking committee. We've got a lot of good directors and managers on our staff, but Jerry Adams is really good, and I would look to him first for ideas on how we want to address specific parking issues. I like the line in here about preserving our existing affordable housing should be a key consideration. I think should be a key priority. There's a reference to greening standards. There are greening standards in the current zoning code, I believe. So, and there are design standards in the current zoning code. They both work. They both should be, I'm sure they're enforced. The staff list of recommendations, first one is additional background. It did strike me that there's no history in this document, and there is so much history just in the last 20 years in Ardmore, and it needs to be part of this because this should be a roadmap for the next 20 years. The end of this plan, implementation plan, near-term actions, it talks about the next 3 to 6 months. How about the next 3 to 6 to 10 to 15 years? That's a plan. That should be a roadmap for a long time. We're still using the Bryn Mawr master plan from 10 or 12 years ago. It's still our roadmap. And then the staff makes a good point about reference to a village. I always thought in Bryn Mawr we sort of pushed the envelope on calling it a village. It works, but Ardmore's bigger. I don't think Ardmore is a village. I think it's more than that. And so I agree with the staff comment there as to vision. It's a town center, a main street. Jillian referred to a somewhat more regional. That makes sense to me. So then one of the things that also I think to deal with height and zoning, what also is missing here is there's not a block diagram. What would what do the consultants, with the input they received, envision for, you know, the 10 and 20-year build out? And what, you know, there's reference to using subzones. So if there's a zoning overlay that has subzones and height varies by subzone, that work was referred to, that work needs to be done. I mean, that's, I don't know why that wouldn't be part of this process. Because you have different height limits in different subzones within Ardmore. So I thought that Pete Stas talked very well about, he's got a development that's 5 stories that is works well. The incentives, you know, Commissioner Courtney, you know, it's important for sustainability incentives and affordable housing incentives. I mean, that work needs to be done. It seems to me it needs to be done as part of this process, because I think of it as starting with height, not ending with height. Like, try and work through the height issue in the beginning rather than the end. Maybe it's too late for that, but that's how I would envision it. So there is more work needed there, and you know, the stormwater, I mean, I think Chris said it, but I mean, the code said anything new is going to have stormwater management. What's old doesn't have any. And so that's sort of already addressed by our township code. So the precision, using subzones to get precision by parcel is a way to deal with what height makes sense. Must didn't work. Must used circles. That was a bad idea from day one, because you had the same parcel, you know, with a line through it for the circle. But doing it by parcel makes sense. And Commissioner Kramer talked about transit-oriented development as sort of fundamental for Ardmore, fundamental for Bryn Mawr. You know, you've got transit there, so some density near transit is a concept that we've been, you know, we've been implementing for a long time in this community, and it's getting implemented all over the country. TOD is not a new concept, but a concept that works and is highly sustainable because it encourages use of mass transit. You know, we all struggle because SEPTA's not near where it was in 2019 in terms of how it's used. You couldn't find a place to park your car in 2019 because everybody was on the train in the SEPTA parking lots. Hopefully that will come back, because that's a sustainable. We're not going to live in the city, as our president said, but using public transit that we have and that's part of Ardmore and part of Bryn Mawr is so important to this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Zelvin. Commissioner McComb.
I want to be extremely brief because it's getting late, and I think a lot of good stuff has been said. I just want to comment on one thing. I see Rich Widman's here and made comments before the Planning Commission that the master plan doesn't really address maintenance of street trees. You know, most of the people who commented talked about walkability, vibrancy, sort of greening, sustainability, all these things. A maintenance plan for street trees really is critical. I think ultimately 10 years from now the success of this will be if it's walkable, there are trees, there's greenery, and we don't have stormwater management issues. That would be huge. So that's my only comment. It's something that just goes into the mix. But I think it's a really good start, and I appreciate the work of staff on it.
Thank you. Any other commissioner questions, comments? All right, I'll just try to be very brief to close it. You know, I think if we go back to 2019 when MUST was repealed and the height limit of 3 stories was set in, I thought that was very good for the time because the development had just been excessive and not surgical. And I don't see the reason of 6-story development at this point. I think any kind of a new development should be surgical, as President Sinai mentioned, and I remind my colleagues too that once you change the zoning, you let the genie out of the bottle, and we could have placeholder projects and other things that are there for years. So it's not something to jump into too quickly. I mean, I respect the fact that the master planning has been a very, a thoughtful and thorough process, but we should be very, very cautious before we go down the road of adding anything such as additional stories, because the genie's out of the bottle and it can take years to put it back in, and there can be placeholders, and you really lose control of you can lose control of what happens then. So with that, seeing no other Commissioner questions, comments, I think that mercifully ends the Building and Planning Commission meeting. President Simon.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McKeon. And yeah, you drew the big committee for the vice chair this evening. So believe it or not, we do have an additional committee meeting this evening. That's the Administrative and Human Resources Committee, and I recognize its chair, Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you very much. We have one item tonight on our agenda, and that's an approval for a proposed 4-year labor agreement with the Workers Association. I would first like to put forth a motion and then ask Manager McNeely to expound on this item, and then we'll have public comment, and then we will vote. So consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners approval of a proposed 4-year labor agreement with the Workers Association for the period 2023 to 2026. Do I have a second? Everyone.
Done.
But I will recognize Vice President McGavran. So, Manager McNeely, would you like to take a few moments to explain?
Certainly, Commissioner Churchill. As you're aware, we have been negotiating with the Workers Association since late last year and then through early this year in multiple meetings. You're aware because I've been periodically briefing you on the progress. The Workers Association represents approximately 217 positions in the township workforce. They're our largest union. They represent folks from the outdoor workers to office workers, some of our technical workers. So it's a diverse union. We reached what we thought was a proposed settlement, and the union leadership agreed, but then the union voted it down. We came back to you in executive session. We made some very minor tweaks to the offer, and so the union has now conducted a vote and voted resoundingly to resolve the contract. The contract is a 4-year agreement. It includes raises of 4.75% for 2023 and then 3.5% in each of the subsequent years going through 2026. There's a provision in here, without getting into a lot of detail, that will eventually, by 2026, include all employees paying the same rate. We have had a variety of changes over the years whereby we have certain employees, depending on when they're hired, contribute at a certain rate to the pension plan, and then other employees who are hired later contributing basically 5% towards the pension plan. This will get rid of that bifurcated system and have everybody on the same pension contribution, which will help the pension fund funding, actuarial funding. It awards an additional holiday of Juneteenth to the Workers Association. That contains some minor changes to time off for one very small group of library employees who were different than all the rest of the Workers Association. Essentially 2 positions in the libraries had a different vacation schedule than everybody else for some reason. Old historical contract settlement from long ago. We're straightening that out and making it all the same. We're also making a provision to give a personal day to school crossing guards in case they need to use it for a doctor's appointment or something like that. And finally, the settlement agrees to form a committee with the Workers Association, a labor management committee, to talk about the pension plan and the formula in the pension plan, anything related to the pension plan benefits, and also to talk about parental leave, an item that the board has been interested in over time. Currently only have parental leave for the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police. It's not present in the Workers Association or for our non-union personnel. So that's sort of the outline of the collective bargaining agreement settlement that is proposed here. The cost is approximately $2.41 million over a 4-year period. It's approximately $631,000 per year. The first year is obviously a higher wage increase, but part of that is in recognition of the rather high inflationary period we've been through over this past year, when our employees were getting much smaller wages than increases than the CPI, and also to some extent, as we've discussed, some recognition that when the COVID crisis hit, the Workers Association worked with us in recognition of the revenue loss the township would face, and took a year with a 0 increase. Be glad to answer any questions.
Well, any commissioner comment? Yes.
I'd just like to thank Manager McNeely for shepherding this contract through. I think it's a great product, and thank you to the board and to Manager McNeely and to the Workers Association for agreeing to discuss parental leave in the coming year.
Any other commissioner comments? Yes, Commissioner Bernheim.
Yeah, at the risk of being redundant, I know that Manager McNeely and a lot of his staff have worked on this over a period of time. Having gone through a number of these Worker Association contracts, I know that it can be difficult. We always want to make sure that we recognize those that work for the township in a fair and equitable manner. And I think that this is reflective of the board doing just that. So without belaboring things, noting that it's almost 9:20 this evening, certainly get gratitude, at least from myself, and I'm sure from others. And I'm glad to see that this come forward, and thank you all who were involved.
Any other commissioner comment? Commissioner Seloff.
Thank you, Commissioner Churchill. I am going to belabor things for a moment. Adding Juneteenth as a holiday makes sense. We have and I have a high regard for our workforce. But I have a great deal of difficulty with the fact that we did not eliminate another existing holiday in exchange for Juneteenth. Good Friday is the obvious candidate. The paid time off provided to our workforce is significant. It falls into many different categories. So I'm not supportive of adding a holiday. I am supportive of Juneteenth, but I think it should have been exchanged for an existing holiday. Please understand that I have a high regard for our workforce, but for the first time in my time as a commissioner, I cannot support a contract with that provision.
Any other commissioner comment? Seeing none. Any public comment?
Adrian Seltzer, Wynwood. Last year, about this time, on behalf of the NAACP, we submitted a resolution to the Board of Commissioners. And even though you did not accept the resolution as it was presented, you did a proclamation. One of the things in our resolution was that whereas the United States of America, the state of Pennsylvania, the counties of Montgomery, Delaware, and Chester, and the townships of Tredyffrin and Radnor all recognize Juneteenth as an official holiday. Be it therefore resolved that the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP Mainline Branch, requests that the Board of Commissioners for the Township of Lower Merion work towards incorporating equity into all facets of the township's purchasing. In any case, I won't go through the whole thing, but yay on doing this. I'm sorry I disagree with you, Commissioner Zella, but I think this is an important thing. It is an important message to our residents that this will be a holiday in this township. And I thank you, and I hope you guys all vote for it. Thank you very much.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor of approving this proposed 4-year labor agreement, raise your hand, say aye. All those opposed, 1, 2, 3. 2? No? Ray?
No, I'm not opposed.
Okay, there's two opposed. I didn't see Commissioner Stevenson.
Longer, guys. I missed you last
Okay, so this would pass 12-2.
Correct.
And that concludes the business of the Human Relations Department or Committee. I would just say that I hope the next holiday that we might consider would occur on December 23rd, 1783, which I think is a rather important date, but I'll let you folks look that up. Thank you. That concludes our business.
Okay, duly noted.
Your birthday.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Besides that.
So we are not done. We have a special Board of Commissioners meeting, so I will call that to order with the April 12th, 2023. Special meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Township of Lower Merion. Please come to order. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Grimes is asked to be excused. Mr. Bernheim.
Present.
Mr. Churchill.
Here.
Mr. Courtney.
Here.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yep.
Ms. S. Kramer. Here. Ms. G. Kramer.
Here.
Mr. McComb.
Here.
Mr. McKeon.
Here.
Ms. O'Neill.
Here.
Mr. Stevenson.
Here.
Mr. Whalen.
Present.
Mr. Zello.
Here.
Mr. Sinai.
Here.
Mr. President, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. So we turn to public comment because this is a special Board of Commissioners meeting. We do not have public privilege. We only have the section of our meeting where members of the public may address the board on any agenda items. And we only have one, which is the Administrative and Human Resources ratification of the Workers Association agreement that we just voted on. Does anyone wish to provide public comment?
Just ditto what I said.
Okay. Yes, I did. Anyone online?
No. Nope.
Okay, super. So with that, we go to the Administrative and Human Resources Committee approval. So it's the approval of the proposed 4-year labor agreement with the Workers Association, excuse me, for the period of 2023 through 2026. And I will move that we approve the proposed 4-year labor agreement with the Workers Association for the period of 2023 through 2026. Do I have a second? Thank you, Vice President Gavin. Do we just vote on this, or is it a roll?
Yeah, you can just.
Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, opposed? Okay, abstentions? So that is 11-2?
11-2, and actually the vote the last meeting was 11-2.
Yeah, you cut that as well. Okay, thank you very much. With that, we are adjourned for this evening.
Time.